Welcome back to the Celtics Nation Rise podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Aldrich. Alongside me is my co-host, Seamus Zarlingo. We have a very special guest today on the podcast, joining us again, actually the first time we joined Celtics Talk Weekly, and now joining us once again, Coach AJ. Thank you for joining this draft episode 52, presented by Celtics Talk Weekly. Welcome. How has your summer been? How's it been going from a coaching standpoint, too, before we dive into the NBA draft?
Summer's been good. We're wrapping up our college summer league that we host. Not only just for our guys, but any local guys, D3, D2, that are just back home in the Maine area for the summer, gives them an opportunity where they can play in that competitive environment. We wrap up next Monday, but it's been good all around competition. We've got some incoming freshmen that with some of the numbers we didn't get to the number we typically got at, so we were able to ask some of the local incoming freshmen that are moving on to some D3s. Like we have one young man from Shevers High School that's going down to Catholic University in Washington, D.C. But overall, it's been great. Once that wraps up, we'll then get the guys back together after the 4th and start doing some sessions 2 days a week with them. And like I said, before you know it, you're going to get to mid-August, semester gets going, we get going with the team early in September, hits October, and back at it in the season. Celtics also get going too. So exciting times right now for basketball all around with the NBA finals just ending. But like you guys always know, basketball never stops.
Oh, yeah, totally. But to ask a question off of that too, who did you predict winning the NBA finals? And was that a shocker to you? Obviously, your Pistons kind of got out early, but obviously a lot of news. We haven't talked, way before even the playoffs. Were you shocked with the outcome that happened?
I wasn't, as all basketball fans, you hear game 7 and like all day Sunday, I'm sure you guys are the same, you were just, give me 8 o'clock. Just give me 8 o'clock. Just give me the game. The way the game started, and I will say this, I was all in for Indiana winning it. Just the story, like what they were able to do, like they couldn't compare it to what kind of like run they were on. The way the game started, I'm like, okay, this is going in their favor. This is exactly what you need. And the moment Halliburton went down, I felt like a gut punch hit me. I don't know if you guys probably felt something similar, but like to me, it's just kind of like you knew it was just inevitable that OKC was going to take over, and that third quarter hit, it was over. I mean, the better team won. What's scary is OKC super young. They got that core. They got a bajillion draft picks. I mean, they could really say, hey, let's go repeat, and they have all these draft picks and some assets they can throw in and go get a Giannis or go get a high premier player just to add more value to them. But I do think the right team did win in the end. Would have been the Celtics if Tatum doesn't go down.
It's definitely a question. But speaking of basketball too, I have this picture really quick to throw up of you in your coaching days, and then I wanted you to explain this one for us too. I had to pull this one up on the stream. I was looking up pictures of you, and I came across this one. So if you wanted to explain that one for us. Big trophy right there.
Yeah, so that was from senior year in high school. That was in 2009 of my senior year. And growing up in Michigan, I can kind of show you guys here in the hand. I live in what's called the Thumb. So we had a bunch of sport writers put together. They call it like the Thumb Writer Association. I can't remember the exact acronym they were. But it was all the local sports writers in the Thumb area. They would collectively come together. They would put together like an all Thumb team, first and second team. There would be a coach of the year, team of the year, and then they had a player of the year. So they started this up like in 05, 06 around there. I was very fortunate enough to win it my senior year. I was the first person from my high school to win a Thumb Player of the Year award. But what was super cool about that photo, like that was with my dad. My dad was my high school coach. So, anytime like now that we've gotten older, we can reflect back now. When I played for him, like it was hard to play for him, and he gave me the heads up, like, I'm going to be hard on you. And like, again, the father-son relationship thing. And I understood that. But now as we've gotten older, we can reflect back and like that was a super cool thing that we got to experience together during my high school career, getting to play for him. And I'll give a special shout out to him too. Like not long after that photo was taken, he was inducted into the BCAM, which is the Coaches Association of Michigan. He got inducted into the Hall of Fame. So it's a really cool, as you can see, I'm from a basketball family. That's where the basketball tree really starts with that guy there. But it's funny you dug into those archives and found that photo. So I know there's a lot of photos from that big photo shoot we did. So kudos to you on finding that.
Definitely a fun one to find and a great story to hear. So, you already mentioned it, NBA draft coming up. And my first question for you guys is, what player are you guys most excited to see go into the NBA in this draft? Obviously, a loaded draft, and we could start off with you, Seamus, and go around the panel. But who are you most excited to see in the NBA?
Well, I gotta say, any new player coming into the league, I gotta be excited over. Okay, because the potential is endless in every single player. I mean, obviously, some players have more potential than others. As we see, Cooper Flag, #1 overall, where he's going to be a huge part of the conversation today. But you look at the entire board. There's every single year players present themselves at every single level, whether it's the top 10, whether it's the lottery, the top 20, the first round, or even the second round, that go on to impact the NBA and franchises in the NBA in different ways, whether they're, a Jason Tatum level superstar or just a role player at the end of the bench, really making a contribution. We just watched a series between two teams with tremendous depth. And you think about some of the players who made an impact in that series. Look at Aaron Wiggins. He's essentially the ninth, 10th, 11th man on the OKC Thunder, yet he has a huge game too. And if that doesn't happen, OKC, they might be down 0-2 in the series going back to Indiana. And it's just the little contributions like that from a role player like Andrew Wiggins that can ultimately flip an entire team's fortunes in time. So there's going to be opportunities to grab a player like that at every single level. However, in this draft, I mean, the top, in my mind, I have a clear top six, and it's the top six in which we see on a lot of draft boards. It's Flag, it's Harper, and then after that, you have the conversation. I have like the next tier after Flag and Harper. They seem to be the consensus 1 and 2. At three, you have a lot of people are talking about VJ Edgecombe. At four, a lot of people are talking about Con Knipple. And then you have Ace Bailey. Where is Ace Bailey going to go? We're going to talk about him a little bit more later. But he's uber talented. It's just, is the personality completely there? We don't really know about that. But Ace Bailey, he's certainly going. It's the question with him is how far is he going to fall in the draft? But he's certainly a top prospect. Trey Johnson is on my list of top prospects. I think he's going to be a certified player in the NBA, whether he's a role player or a star player. I think he's either going to be a high level role player or potentially a second or third type of star player. Maybe not your first guy, but your second or third guy in the NBA. After that, I think the board gets really expansive. I would add in Malawach to that top seven right there. I would slot him in at seven. I love Malawach as a prospect. He's kind of a no fail prospect in my mind. Maybe not, doesn't play like Zach Edey, but you look at Zach Edey last year, and I think that was part of the conversation with him, or rather the viewpoint of him is he's going to be a player where his floor, he's going to grab 10 boards a night, he's going to be a shot deterrent, and he's going to be able to catch a lot of balls around the rim and go up and put up some putbacks and ultimately just be an all around, not necessarily an all around big guy, not a perimeter big guy, but an interior big guy, kind of like a Zubac type of big. That's where Edie's floor is. But that's where I see Malawach's floor as well. After that, the board gets really expansive on who people like. Carter Bryant, Colin Murray Boyles, and Cedric Coward. Those three players to me, and even I would add in Rasheer Fleming into that. Those players and Rasheer Fleming less so, but I would still add him into that group. Those are all versatile forwards. I see not as star players whatsoever, but I see them as good role players in the league as wings, right? So players who can shoot the ball, switch on defense. And I think that is just, we look around the league, most teams, what are they looking for? They're looking for switchable wings. They always want switchable wings. And I think those three players are four players right there. Cedric Coward, Carter Bryant, Colin Murray Boyles, and even Rasheer Fleming, I would add him into that list. I would classify those guys as your Derek Jones Jr. type players, right? Guys who don't necessarily handle the ball, but do all the little intangible things as switchable wings. So those are some of the players I'm really looking at. We could really get down the board to where the Celtics are drafting. There's some big guys. I like Joan Behringer. He's from overseas. I think I have him as a top big in this draft, and people have him as high as 12. They have him as low as 40. It's you never know where some of these players are actually going to go. Obviously, Walter Clayton Jr. People like. I see him as a Fred Van Vliet type. A player. Questions surround him of is he just another small guard, a small scoring guard in college who became a star who can't do the same thing in the NBA, can't score in the same way, and is just a small defender who's not going to be able to make an impact at that next level. Walter Clayton Jr., Danny Wolf. I'm not a huge Danny Wolf fan. There's some questions with him on exactly what type of big. That's kind of the thing with some of these players in this draft is I question. There are some players that I can definitively see filling a role in the NBA, and that's why I feel as if the top 7, 8 guys, or even the top 7 guys for sure. I'm looking at all of them going, I see a specific mold for them in the NBA. When you get down the board, you start running into players where you question, what exactly is this player in the NBA? Is he an undersized big? Is he an oversized wing? What type? And you get into the guards like that too, like Yaka Chonis. Yaka Chonis is a definitive guard the way he plays the game, but I just wonder with him, what type of guard is he going to be? What type of lineup does he actually slot into if he's this bigger guard who's handling the ball? And he's not really, in my mind, he's not providing a ton defensively. So I just wonder where he kind of slots into a lineup. And Derek Queen as well. He's kind of the undersized, big, oversized wing type of player. I'm not really sure where he fits into the league or what type of lineups he really fits into. Although some people like his versatility, very quick, quick feet, very agile. But those are just some of the players. We'll get into more players, as we go on here. But just comes, off the top of my head, Jace Richardson, smaller guard. I think Jace Richardson to me has a little more upside than Walter Clayton because of his defensive presence. He's a little more active defensively. The only thing is with Walter Clayton and Jace Richardson, they're both 6 foot tall. So anytime you're drafting a 6 foot tall guard, you have to. I mean, you have to have a pretty big team around him to mask those defensive inefficiencies. But those are just some of the players. I mean, you could go all the way down the board, like I said, into the second round. Could talk about all these players all night long. But in terms of the first round, that's just what comes to mind. How about you, Coach? What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of ground with a lot of those players, and you mentioned a lot of them that I grew liking to watching them develop throughout the year. Um, when you look at the college game, and I know we're going to talk about Ace Bailey in a little bit, but something that's unique is like you can tell guys that are molded for the NBA game style versus not molded for like the college game. Like an example I can give you, and like it's gonna be interesting to see where he goes, is Nick Clifford, the kid from Colorado State. He's an older player. You see the trend now. If you're an older player, it's a little tougher to find your niche early in the lottery, especially because they want to go with the youth, the younger guys. So like he's one of those like late bloomers, kind of like he's 22, 23. He's probably step in ready to go, but do teams kind of stray away from that because like he's a little bit older. He's maybe already in his like prime or potentially in it already. Why not take the young guy or take an international guy, a flyer on there to see what we get out of that? So he's one guy to keep an eye on. You mentioned Carter Bryant. I really grew a liking to Carter Bryant throughout his time at Arizona. He doesn't wow you with any of the stats this year, but just the upside that he presents. You see how the league is, and a lot of he's not as big as Tatum, but like he's that guy where it's like if you want to play small, he could play the 4, but he could also be a serviceable just 3-and-D guy for you as well. He's the guy I think there's that mid to late lottery that someone's going to get, and people like 5-10 years from now, if they do a redraft and be like, wow, we missed it on this kid. I think he's the guy that kind of is the one where I think 10 years from now, a lot of people are going to be like, geez, all these teams passed up on Carter Bryant and he landed here somehow. Obviously, Derek Queen, really big on him. The other name really for more of the Celtics focus that you didn't mention, and I kind of in a way hope he falls to him, but I'm a little worried he might go earlier by more and more conversations I'm hearing, is Maxime Rainin. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. The 7-footer from Stanford. His style of play fits the Celtics system to a T. Stretch five, can handle it. Again, you know, he's kind of like Porzingis built, so a little bit of that frame is going to scare people a little bit. But I think knowing with what the Celtics could look like this upcoming year, if he is there, if I'm Brad Stevens, I'm sprinting to the podium and taking him. Just because of the versatility and what he can provide with that length, stretching the floor out, and obviously when Tatum is back, given a year of service for Maxim, like what does he look like in year two when you got the best player on the floor next to him, really spacing the floor out. So outside of those other names, like those are the other guys, you know, we haven't talked about yet that I'm kind of curious on to see where they fall and then where everything unfolds starting tomorrow with the draft.
Well, I have a question for you too before I say who I'm excited to see. But for your Pistons, who do you hope the Pistons lock in on in this NBA draft? I know you're a big Pistons guy, so I appreciate you talking about the Celtics, but who do you hope to have on the Pistons once this draft is set and over with?
I mean, to be honest, like I'm kind of sitting here waiting for Trajan Langford to make a move. I mean, again, we talked a little bit about the Halliburton injury a little bit earlier, but the moment he went down, my good buddy sent me a text message being like, the East is wide open next year. Pistons, you're like one solid move away from being in that conversation. Orlando already made a move. Orlando is now ahead of us. Like there's other teams that are going to make moves to make jumps because the East is so wide open. I think really what you need, like obviously Malik Beasley was an incredible asset for K from his shooting ability. I think you can't ever get enough shooting with how the league is. So I hope they take kind of someone that's serviceable because they don't have a first round pick. They only have a second round. So I hope they take the best available guy that can step in right away and contribute. We know how this draft goes. Somebody's going to fall out of the first round, and the Pistons might be like, we got this young man falling into our lap. Like, we'll take him in a heartbeat. So I hope they make the right moves. I have a lot of faith in Trajan and what he's trying to do, changing that organization around. So I hope it's some shooting ability to really help Cade out and spacing the floor. But again, I'm pulling for maybe a move or two to happen here in the next 24 hours. So we'll see.
Griffin, you're going to love this one. Tankathon has the Pistons at 37 right now, taking Giovanni Broome. So Griffin, I know you were maybe talking about him.
Well, we could put him.
I'm not saying anything about Giovanni Broome here. I'm not a huge Giovanni Broome fan. In terms of the NBA standard, I from a college level standpoint, Giovanni Broome definitely a player I want on my team. But in the NBA, I don't know if he has enough intangibles to stay in. Like, I don't know if he does enough things well enough to stay in the league. Because I just, the way he played in college, that is just, to me, not on the table in the NBA. And the way he would need to play in the NBA is more like, not necessarily Tatum, but that's his size, right? If guys his size are playing like Tatum and he's playing like, I don't want to say Zubac, I don't want to bring that comparison up again, but he's playing like a low post big, right? He's playing like more so in the low post as a 6'9", 6'10" player. I feel as if those players need to be a little bit more perimeter oriented, and I don't know if Giovanni Broome is quick enough, athletic enough to play on the perimeter as much as he might need to in the NBA.
Well, going back to my takes from that last podcast we had with Coach AJ, episode 30, the NCAA episode, I wasn't very well educated on college basketball, which I've gotten better. But I will say I'm not huge on him. I think I love what you said, Seamus. I feel like he's a player that it's definitely interesting to see. And I feel like he's a player that's instantly gonna, when he gets drafted, gonna be developed in the G League. So I'm interested to see him in the NBA just to see like kind of what he could do and like what route they're gonna go with Broome. Because I'm curious, is he going to drown in the NBA or is he going to thrive? Is he going to be a player that they could develop him in the G League, whether it be the Celtics, Pistons, or another team that could draft him? So that's definitely a question mark. I will say, talking about that, again, Walter Clayton, too, I'm interested to see what he could kind of do. And I think that's one where the Celtics had some eyes on as well. And I'm not sure what the latest is on that. So that's one from a Celtics standpoint. But you guys are obviously going to know the obvious answer to this question for me. Cooper Flag, you guys know I'm excited to see him in the NBA. I'm obviously a big guy on Cooper Flag growing up in Maine, in Madison, which was 45 minutes. And we talked earlier, Coach, about, you going up Northern. Did you end up going by Nokomis, his high school? Did you end up going through that area?
I've gone through Nokomis once. I went on a recruiting trip up to Bangor High School, and it's kind of one of those ones where it's like if you're not paying attention on the highway, you have no idea you just passed the city. But it's that small, tight knit community. So I've never been to the actual school, but I have drove by Nokomis itself, so I do know where it is now in the state of Maine. But I mean, it is up there. You're kind of in the, not, I wouldn't say the middle of nowhere, but from Boston and the other metropolitan cities, like you are far, far away from that.
Oh, definitely. And I'm excited to see him as you see him with his brother right there and Brian Scalabrine. But I'm excited to see what can happen there as we transition into some talk with Cooper Flag, because this is definitely going to be one where a lot of people are very prominent on he's going to be good. I've even heard some talk saying that Dylan Harper is better. I've heard some talk saying that he's not going to do well in the NBA. So the first question is, what kind of player will the Mavericks be getting with Cooper Flag? Obviously, we know who the first pick is. I think it's going to be a real shock if the Mavericks end up picking someone else. There's no chance, I believe, the Mavericks pick anyone else. I think it's safe to say pretty much right now, as the time that we're recording, that Cooper Flag is a Dallas Maverick. I think we knew that a while ago. But again, what kind of player are the Mavericks getting with Cooper Flag? And we can start off with you again, Seamus, and we'll go around. What kind of player are they getting?
Well, the Mavericks are so interesting well, first off, we don't know exactly what type of moves the Mavericks will make this summer and what kind of team they'll actually have going into next season. What we do know is they're likely going into next season with Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, and Cooper Flag. Those are the top three at the roster. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Mavericks mesh the different eras together, because they're almost in a Celtics situation with Kyrie. Ironically, Kyrie falls into this situation yet again where Brown and Tatum, they're there as the next young pillars of the Celtics franchise, yet, oh, there's Kyrie Irving, there's Gordon Hayward there in 17-18. And that's kind of where the Mavericks are right now, is they're at a competitive tilt in the Western Conference, yet their next generation is actually coming to the forefront in Cooper Flag in this draft. And I think he's going to be an impact player right away. There's a lot of noise about him being a starter right away. And the whole selling point with Cooper Flag, obviously, there's the all around game and the skill set, but it's also the competitiveness of Cooper Flag. And I think that's what I'm most interested in looking at or examining from Cooper Flag's perspective in his rookie year, is just how competitive he actually is as an NBA player and how aggressive he is as an NBA player, and what kind of responsibility the Mavericks actually bring to him early on in his career. Because Kyrie, he's going to miss we don't know how long Kyrie's going to miss, but we think it's going to be likely until Christmas or beyond. And you think about the Mavericks roster, there's going to be a lot of responsibility put on Anthony Davis at the beginning of the season with Kyrie out. When Kyrie comes back, he's going to take over ball handling responsibilities. And again, it's to be foreseen if the Mavericks actually make a move this summer for another ball handler, because if you look at their guard rotation, it's void of. I mean, they're losing Spencer Dinwiddie and Dante Exum in free agency. The only guards right now in their rotation, it's Brandon Williams and Jaden Hardy. That's the other guard in their rotation. Kyrie's out. So there may be another ball handler in there, but I do wonder, when Kyrie's out of the lineup, what kind of responsibility does Cooper Flag actually have as an 18, 19-year-old coming into a team that actually has expectations to compete next season? I think this is one of the more unique situations we've ever seen in the NBA. It feels like we constantly are forming those across the league, like Luka and LeBron. I don't remember anything like that ever happening in the league. We have Cooper Flag on the Mavericks, and a little reminiscent of the Celtics with Brown and Tatum and Kyrie and Hayward. But Otherwise, it's not quite to that same level. And I think Cooper Flag coming in, I think he's going to make an impact for Dallas, and I think he's going to be a player we see as the season rolls along. He's just going to get better, and I expect him to be on the same trajectory as guys like Paolo Banchero and Cade Cunningham, where you see the numbers and you see the usage go up from year to year, and by year 3, year 4, I mean they're nearly a certified all-star at that point. I think that's where we're going with Cooper Flag in the NBA.
Yeah, but what about you, Coach AJ? What do you see from Cooper Flag being drafted to the Dallas Mavericks, and what kind of contributions will he make with Dallas in year one?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me the most with just his play and just the situation he's going into, like, first, he's a winner. He's going to come in with the mindset like, I'm just here to win. I don't care what it is for points, rebounds, blocks, whatever you need me to do. I just want to win. So I think that fiery competitiveness, I think, is really going to rejuvenate, especially that Dallas fan base after the debacle of trading Luka. The fan base kind of losing its trust in the organization. Now insert Cooper Flag. Now you got this prominent figure that you can really rally around. And I think the city is really going to take him in very well. Another thing too that I think for him, this is kind of in a way, we were all shocked when Dallas won the lottery. This is in a way best case scenario for Cooper. He's not, again, you're the number one pick. There's going to be that pressure. But think about who's in the locker room with them. Anthony Davis, former number one pick. Kyrie, former number one pick. So he's got two guys, two veterans, all NBA veterans that he can lean on and kind of pick their brains a little bit, being like, how did you handle this expectation? We had the media constantly on you, like, what is that you did to grasp with it? And not only with those two, you got another Hall of Famer in that locker room in Klay Thompson. So again, from a current player standpoint, he's got two number one picks, former number one picks, 3 Hall of Famers, and he's got a head coach that's going to be a Hall of Famer too in Jason Kidd, who was also a very high draft pick back when he was drafted in the NBA. So I think from a veteran's presence, he's going to be surrounded with the right people. And I think he's going to go in like, yeah, there's going to be that pressure standpoint, but I think his mindset's like, there's no pressure on me. We got these key figures that are supposed to lead us. I'm supposed to be in here to really jumpstart and get us back into the playoff picture and be a talking point as a contender year in and year out. So I think Seamus is right. I think you're going to gradually see that usage rate go up and higher and higher and higher. But I think when it comes to end of game situations as an 18, 19-year-old when he's in the league, you're going to see him on the floor. I really think by the time 2028 hits, he's going to be one of the faces of, not just the up and coming stars of the NBA, but he's going to be one of the faces of USA basketball as well in 2028.
No, a great take right there. And I completely agree with that take. And I love what you said right there about the veteran presence that he has in that locker room. And I think that's the best situation for him, as you already mentioned too, because you're going into a team which it's not the Wizards, it's not the Hornets, it's not like a team that you're not going to see a lot of shine. However, going to Dallas, this is the best option for him because he has other stars around him who could help him with his development and everything. Now, I'm not sure how long the window is, meaning with AD being on the older side, you have obviously Kyrie Irving getting that injury and being on the older side as well. Same with Klay Thompson. So I'm not sure how long that window is, and who knows how long he will be with Dallas, just because you already saw them move off of Luka. So it's like, how long could he be there? Could there ever be Cooper Flag in another situation? But the situation that he's going into, getting that number one pick with Dallas, with those veterans, is just amazing thing for Cooper Flag. And I see him there being a lot of success. He's a player that has a lot of grit, and he has something to prove. I mean, you said it earlier too, when in Nokomis, you drive there and it's in the middle of nowhere, and he has something to prove. And I think he's trying to show the world that, you could come from a little town in Maine, which there's not a lot of stars that really came from Maine. Obviously there's some, but there's not you could look back at St. Louis, for example, Jason Tatum, you highlight that, and you look at some players from Ohio, LeBron James, and you look at those players. However, there's not a player that has the whole state behind them, and Cooper Flag, I think, has that to prove, and he wants to prove that. All right, look, I came from a place that not a lot of people look at in a competitive way. However, it is very competitive, and I think that he has the whole state on his shoulders too that are going to root for him all the way through. But I have some pictures obviously here too that I wanted to bring up because I thought it was funny how you see he has a little facial hair growing. You saw that, he was a 17-year-old, maybe 18 in college, but now look at Cooper Flag. So just a funny little question I want to ask you guys is, what do you think was the inspiration behind getting the goatee and mustache? Because he did not have that in college. Do you think it's, he's doing a big boy step, so he's like, all right, I gotta grow out the facial hair. What do you guys think the inspiration behind that was?
Well, look at Derek White. I mean, I feel like Derek White shaving his head, that was over a little bit of the intimidation factor of Derek White. Beforehand, he's got this kind of puffy hair going on. Not as intimidating of a look as just straight bald. I feel as if you had some facial hair. We've seen NBA players over time. They just they outgrow that baby face. Adds a little bit of an intimidation factor to them. Kind of adds a little over time. It's like, oh, that's a grizzled veteran in there. Maybe not so much for rookies or second year or third year guys, but over time, you see the guys grow the big beards, and I don't know. I mean, facial hair. I obviously I'm all for the facial hair out here. I don't know about. I know Griffin. You're a little mixed, right? You like to dabble in the goatee and the mustache, and then other times you're. And then Franco had the biggest one this past week. He had the full beard going, and then new job offer, whoop, came right off. And
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say I pretty much keep the mustache. The mustache goes from time to time, but like I stay with the mustache. But what about you, Coach AJ? Are you like, what's this on there? Because you don't have any facial hair. So do you think, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, as you could tell, growing up, I was always known as like the babyface assassin. I mean, Griffin, you've been around me for a year now. Like what you see on my face, like the little bit of scruff, like that's the best I can do. I wasn't blessed by the facial hair gods to really develop any of that type of stuff. For me, I love it for Coop. Like I think for him, like I think this is just a new chapter. I think he's just trying to say, hey, it's like, everyone has that infamous New Year hits. It's like, hey, new year, new me. I think it's just more of like, hey, I'm now stepping up in the world. I want to change things up. I mean, he's had that baby face all his life thus far. I mean, again, he's only 18 years old, going to be 19 in the next few months. But I just think it's just a different look. I'm all for it. I think he means business. And I just, like I said, and maybe it could be someone in his ear just being like, hey, why don't you grow a little facial hair to really show out? So who knows? We'll see. It could be just a PR stunt.
Now, Coach, do you have a standard within your program for facial hair? Do you like to see guys more clean cut, or are you a little bit more liberal in that standpoint, where you're like, okay, guys can have their own style, or are you more, the conformity of everybody's clean cut? I came from a clean cut program. It's like everybody it's surprisingly so on my face. Like my coaches always were clean cut, clean cut, clean cut. But I know other teams we faced, it was like they were just allowed to do whatever they want. So within your program, how does that go about?
Yeah, I have no rules against it. I think in a lot of ways it allows the young men to express themselves. Like we had a former player, like you look at him now, and if I would have told you back when he played for us in his last year, like, during COVID, he grew his hair out. He had a man bun during his last year, had like a little bit of like a chin strap type of thing. And it's just like, hey, go express yourself. If that's how you want to look, like, and you're confident with it, hey, I got your back. Like I'll go to war with you. So I don't have anything really against that. It's kind of like, in a way, the similar topic is like the whole shoe thing. You see how the league is now. Like everyone's got different colored shoes. Back in the league, it was like, hey, you had to wear a certain color and stuff. For me, I don't care. Like whatever you are comfortable in playing with. If you want to play in those rainbow Kobe's, or if you're like a LeBron shoe, like, hey, do what you are comfortable in, because again, you're the one playing. As long as you are making the right plays, right decisions, scoring, executing, following little details we're asking, as long as we win, I'm cool with whatever you're rocking.
Well, I have to say, I think from Cooper Flag, I think it's going to be more so a Baylor Shireman look. I feel like Baylor, when he got drafted from the Celtics, and I know this story because I actually talked to him about it too, is when he got drafted, he shaved the head, did a buzz cut, shaved the mustache, and everything. And you never see Baylor Shireman with the same look. He either buzz cut with mustache and goatee, or you see him with hair, no mustache, no goatee. It's definitely very up in the air with Baylor Shireman. So I feel like that could be a factor too with Cooper Flag. But I do have to ask too, Coach AJ, I have to say, do you see any other things with Dallas, drafting Cooper Flag? Sorry, as we just had to transition back right there. Do you see any other factors for Dallas with this? Obviously Cooper Flag, he was very dominant in high school and very dominant with Duke. And we talk about it too, the fact that at the end of the year, he was asked to do a lot of things coming in only as a 17-year-old, turning 18, obviously, towards the end of the year back in December. But do you see him and his development kind of taking a little longer to kind of spark, or what do you see from that perspective?
I don't think there's going to be like a slow development. I think he's going to have his bumps in the road. I think like every rookie, you always hear him say like, they always have their welcome to the NBA moment. Like he'll have it like, in a way, like for our college guys, I say to our new guys, like, look, you're going to hit a freshman wall. It's just inevitable. I think for Cooper, the season goes from, he played almost 40 games his freshman year at Duke. Now you're doubling that to an 82-game season. So like there's going to be some woes that hit it. But like I said, I think that presence in the locker room is really going to help him through it. I know Seamus mentioned a little bit earlier, what's going to be interesting when Cooper does arrive, what does this mean for a guy like PJ Washington? What does his role now look like? Because, he was kind of that three-man that kind of was like the unsung hero when they made that finals run, really showed out, being a knockdown shooter, defender, and all that. Now you're inserting Cooper. It's like, what do you do there? So I do think Dallas will make some moves here over the offseason once they insert Cooper. But I think overall, though, I don't see any hiccups. I just think there'll be some bumps in the road. But again, he's in a great situation.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with that. I feel like he's a player that, obviously, you already mentioned it, Coach AJ, he's going to have that welcome to the NBA moment. But I think he's going to be a great player, and we're going to see a lot of good things from Cooper Flag. I do have to say now, as we transition into our next take with Ace Bailey, he has not done a single workout before the NBA draft. And you see this a lot with players, as a lot of players, they'll not do a certain workout because they don't want to get drafted by that team. And there's a lot of factors into it. However, Ace Bailey has not done any of them as of right now, I'm pretty sure. Does anyone see him falling in the draft? Because we obviously knew going into this draft, it was probably going to be Cooper at 1. You go Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey. You could really go with those two players. Now, my question is, does he fall in the draft? Seamus, we could start off with you again. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it appears as if he's going to fall past Philly. There's a lot of, originally coming into the draft, and even throughout the entire year before we even knew who was going to be picking where, the top three seem to be playing out as Cooper Flag, Dylan Harper, and Ace Bailey. And Ace Bailey throughout the season even had conversations. We had a lot of conversations. All right, folks, we have some breaking news here. We're going to give this out right now here. We're going to react to some trade news yet again from Shams Charania. Breaking: Boston, Atlanta, and Brooklyn are finalizing a 3-team trade that sends Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Atlanta Hawks, Terrence Mann and Atlanta's number 22 pick to the Nets, and Georges Niang and a second-rounder to the Celtics. Breaking here, not live, but on this recording, Kristaps Porzingis, no longer a Boston Celtic. Georges Niang, now with the Boston Celtics. Breaking live. Here we go. Oh, my goodness.
Is this a first for the podcast?
No, we did this last night.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Really? My first reaction to this is This is a player we hated. This is a player we hated to play against. Okay, Georges Niang. Kristaps Porzingis no longer a Boston Celtic. Boston, Atlanta, and Brooklyn finalizing a 3-team deal.
My question is why didn't the Celtics get Terrence Mann, if anything? But George Niang, oh my gosh, this is wow. This definitely.
I don't know how we recover from this again. I don't know.
Yeah,
well, he is a Boston kid, so he is coming back home.
Wow.
He is from I believe he's from the Methuen Lawrence area, I believe.
Wow. What are your thoughts on this trade? Because I can't even wrap my head around it right now. But what about you, Coach AJ?
I mean, Georges Niang, I mean, he's kind of that dirty player, do it all kind of guy. I mean, first off, I mean, you guys had the breaking news yesterday with Drew and Kristaps. We knew the dominoes were going to fall because of the whole second apron, trying to get under the luxury tax, all that. I don't know. It's kind of unique. And again, you just wonder, knowing that Tatum's going to be out for the year, is this like, hey, just short term, maybe some quick things, but also thinking long term at the same time? I don't know. Like I said, I think it's cool that George Niang's coming back home to Boston, and I think the Celtics fan base will rally around that. But like, again, he's kind of one of those guys, kind of like a Draymond Green, where it's like you can't stand the guy when he's playing, but you're happy he's on your team. So you wonder if he'll bring that kind of Boston rugged toughness, blue collar, to really get them going, and kind of almost be like that, a little bit like that enforcer for some of the key guys, to kind of be like, hey, don't mess with him. Like, you got to go through me. He's got one of the best nicknames, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called. It's like something the bus, I think. I can't remember what it is, but he's got one of the all-time great nicknames in the league right now. I think it was like the family van or something like that.
I haven't even heard that one.
I'm last night was fine. Simons was fine. Niang, I've never been a huge Niang fan. Age 32 right now. Just turned 32 7 days ago. The minivan.
I just looked it up. The minivan.
That's a good nickname. But
the minivan.
I am so upset about this. I am a big Porzingis guy, and what was it, Seamus? A second round pick?
Okay, so let's. So yeah, 3-team deal. Let's go through this. Let's go through this again if we can pull it back up. So Porzingis on his way out of Boston, Niang on his way in, and let's get the details on this trade. So it's a 3-team deal between the Nets, the Hawks, and the Celtics. Porzingis going to Atlanta. Wow. So Boston, Atlanta, Brooklyn in the deal. Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Hawks. Terrence Mann and Atlanta's number 22 pick to the Nets. And Georges Niang and a second-rounder to the Celtics. So the Celtics get rid of Porzingis and a second-round pick and get back a second-round pick and Georges Niang.
Wow.
The asset overturn there is a little questionable, I will say, but the biggest detail in this trade is the fact the Celtics have now put themselves under the second apron, which means they don't need to sell Sam Hauser. They don't need to trade. Like, they don't really need to move anybody else for salary cutting purposes. Like we talked about Sam Hauser. They don't need to move Sam Hauser anymore unless they wanted to move him at the deadline or the summer to save even more salary, because the team, I believe, is still over the luxury tax, but they're under the second apron, which the second apron basically just hampers teams completely. The second apron, if we go over the second apron here, the second apron, the restrictions on the second apron: cannot aggregate salaries in a trade. So you can't trade two $10 million guys for a $20 million guy. Cannot take back 125% of the outgoing salary. Must be dollar for dollar straight up. So otherwise, the rule is you can basically take back 25% more than the salary in which you're sending out in the trade. Cannot use taxpayer mid-level exception, which is $5.7 million. So that's just a contract you can hand out there. Cannot sign a waived free agent who previously made over the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is $14.1 million. Cannot use trade exceptions, cannot send out cash in trades, and cannot trade a first-round pick 7 years in advance. And if a team is over the second apron 3 out of 5 seasons, their first round pick moves to the end of the first round. So those are all the second apron implications. The Celtics are now out of the second apron. That's the main point in this trade. That's the value in this trade for the Celtics. But from a player perspective, I don't think people are going to be very happy giving away Kristaps Porzingis for Georges Niang straight up, because that's basically you're swapping second round picks. But from a player's perspective, you're giving away Porzingis, getting back Niang. People are not going to like that whatsoever. But this is a salary move for the Celtics at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's definitely one.
Wow. Just that was a bombshell right there. We had another bombshell last night in Drew Holiday, and man, it's like can we just focus on the draft? It's like can we just the draft keeps getting pushed away, right? On Sunday it was okay, game 7, and then all of a sudden Kevin Durant's traded, and then it's back to game 7, and then we have the Drew Holiday trade. You know, the Halliburton injury is a story in itself, but then we have the Drew Holiday trade. And now we have the Kristaps Porzingis trade. Earlier today, the Jordan Poole trade. I mean, we have all these different moves. Like, can we look at the draft for 2 seconds? Like, feels like the draft is constantly, it's like, oh, here's the draft. It's constantly being pushed away for all these big moves in the NBA. Wow. The NBA is just, it is a constant machine of drama. Just a constant headline machine. I mean, my goodness.
Definitely. But we definitely still got to talk about this. So, Coach AJ, though, what's your thoughts, obviously, after that breaking news about Porzingis, about Ace Bailey, and not wanting to do any of that? What are your thoughts? Not wanting to go to any of the workouts, and could he fall in the draft? We talked about this before, and I loved your take. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I know I said to you before we even jumped on this call, like, I think if Ace Bailey gets taken third by Philly, I don't think he plays for Philly. I think then if he does take it, I think this could be maybe an enticing package. Like you saw the rumors that, you know, they were maybe talking with Utah and potentially sending Paul George out there and do like a swap of the 3 and 5. Kind of a little shades of Trae Young, Luka Doncic type deal where those guys were I think they were the 3rd and 5th picks and they just swapped each other. I don't think he plays for the Sixers, but I know Seamus said it earlier. I really like Edgecombe. He's got this little edge to him, similar to kind of like Cooper. Kind of walks into a gym and expects like I'm the best player in here. I don't care who else is in here. If it's like all these all-stars, like he's got that mindset to him. I think he fits the Philly mold perfectly. But yeah, the Ace Bailey thing, I just think it's just 18 years old. I think it's just a lack of immaturity. And I think he's got the wrong people in his ears right now from influencers. And, you know, for me, the biggest red flag, and nothing against Dylan Harper, but hey, Rutgers, how come you potentially have the 2nd and 3rd best players in this draft class and you couldn't even make the NCAA tournament? Like, again, that's kind of a red flag a little bit. And I think Dylan Harper is very, very good. I think he's going to be a great pro, have shades of like Cade Cunningham. But Ace Bailey, like you see the comparisons, like he's got a ceiling of like Tracy McGrady, but then he's got a floor of like Terrence Ross. Like those are 2 completely different spectrums. So I think he's going to be a high risk, high reward. Somebody's going to take the chance on him. I don't think Philly's going to do it though.
No,
Ace Bailey right now, the red flags that exist with him, and I even think Dylan Harper too to some degree. I think Dylan Harper, I understand he's the consensus number 2 right now. I do have some questions about his floor in the NBA, but ultimately talking about Ace Bailey, first, it doesn't seem as if he's going to Philadelphia because Paul George is talking bad about him right now, and there's a lot of rumblings about Philadelphia liking VJ Edgecombe there at number 3. But Ace Bailey, the question is, how far could he ultimately fall in this year's draft? Because at the beginning of the year, he was talked about as maybe somebody who could be that number 2 pick or even challenge. Every number 1 pick, there's always somebody out there who's challenging them. Like you think back to 2015, it was Towns was the consensus, but then right next to him in the same front court was Trey Lyles, and everybody was thinking, oh well, Trey Lyles, could he be as good as Towns? Well, you have that every single year with the number 1 overall pick throughout the year before they really become the consensus at the end of the season. But Cooper Flag, I mean, there was some talk with Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. Can they make a conversation happen between them and Cooper Flag? Didn't really happen too much throughout the season, but that's where Ace Bailey was. He was in that top 3 with Flag, Harper, and himself. Now it seems as if he's going to move past Philly. Charlotte, there's been a lot of talk about Con Knipple there. I think Charlotte taking Ace Bailey, Brandon Miller, and LaMelo Ball. I really question the maturity in that locker room, and I question the leadership in that locker room. If you need your stars to have good leader like personalities, right? I don't feel as if any of them have the leadership intangibles. But I will say they're all young, except for LaMelo Ball. He's making his way up into the veteran status of the NBA. But Brandon Miller, Ace Bailey, still very young. But I do question if you have those 3 players as your star trio, is there enough maturity there? Is there enough leadership there within that bunch to actually get the job done over time and to actually build a good culture and a good standard there in Charlotte, in which they need right now? I mean, that's why they have Seth Curry down there. That's why they have Taj Gibson down there. That's why not necessarily why they have Yusuf Nurkic down there, but he's used for that as well, just to bring some of that culture, bring some of those NBA the standards of professionalism to Charlotte, right? Number 5, we have Danny Ainge, Austin Ainge, making the decision out there in Utah. It's been said they really like Trey Johnson or even Jeremiah Fears, but if Ace Bailey is there at 5, is that a little bit too? Is that too much to pass up on if you're the Jazz, who doesn't the Jazz don't really have too much to show for after tanking for 3 straight seasons and now winding up with the 5th overall pick. They don't necessarily have too much to show for their franchise. Maybe grabbing Ace Bailey after he falls is pretty enticing for that Utah organization. After that, I don't really see him going past the Wizards. I feel like the Jazz or the Wizards would take Ace Bailey. I really do feel that way, especially the Wizards. They're at 6. I understand they have some wings on their roster, but can never have enough wings. And at the end of the day, if you're picking and choosing between some of those players, that's not the worst position to be in the world if you're the Wizards still building a roster, right? The Wizards aren't necessarily in a position where they're drafting for fit. They're drafting, the best possible player in which could turn their franchise's fortunes around, because they don't have a certified core yet there in Washington. But red flags exist with Ace Bailey. The number 1 red flag being the fact he hasn't worked out for a single team. He right now just seems like an entitled player. Like right now, all these players, I'll mention this, 1 through 60 or 1 through 59 this year, because the Knicks, they forfeited their pick in the 2nd round. But 1 through 59, none of these guys are proven NBA players yet. None of them. And a lot of them, I mean, congrats to the top 10 overall picks and really all the first round picks. They're going to make millions of dollars upon getting to the NBA. But really, it's about that second contract. If you get that second contract, I mean, you could be making upwards of 20, 30, 40 million dollars a year. And these guys, they're not Ace Bailey. He's looking at himself like, oh, one day I'll be that player, but he hasn't earned that yet. And he's acting as if he's earned that right now, picking and choosing what team he wants to go to. But he has to go to the NBA team in which wants him, and he has to thrive in whatever situation he's thrown into. And Coach, you mentioned it, Cooper Flag, you looked at it as if Cooper Flag, he's falling into one of the best situations, and I completely agree, because Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, even Jason Kidd there, they've all been in Cooper Flag's spot in terms of being a top prospect and coming into the league and earning their way into the league, right? Well, Philadelphia, you might have the same ordeal there with Philadelphia, Paul George and Joel Embiid. I understand people have questions about Joel Embiid's work ethic, but we all know Joel Embiid's talent and how long he's been in the league. And you have other players there. Is Kyle Lowry going to come back? Eric Gordon, are they going to come back into the picture? And there's some veterans in which could really help young players out along in their careers. Ace Bailey, he's poo-pooing that situation right now for the Hornets, the Jazz, the Wizards. He wants to be the number 1 option somewhere without actually being that proven player. And I think the fact Rutgers didn't make the NCAA tournament, I compare it to Markelle Fultz back in 2017 with Washington. Everybody, consensus number one pick, Markelle Fultz. But a huge question surrounding him was the fact his team won 9 games with him going into the, like, when Markelle Fultz, his only year in college, his freshman year in college at Washington, they only won 9 games. And everybody looked at that and went, if he's the consensus number one overall, how come they couldn't even win double-digit games in a season worth of 30 games? It made no sense. And we saw what happened to Markelle Fultz. And not saying that's going to be necessarily every single player, because we do understand, there's some pretty rough college teams out there that exist with NBA talent, laced within it. There's a guy from Eastern Washington, if I'm not mistaken, but you guys go to little schools, and sometimes maybe I'm thinking of the guy from Washington State, Cedric Coward. Maybe I'm thinking of him. He might have been at Eastern Washington, regardless. But guys go to littler schools. Sometimes that happens. But that's a red flag for me with Bailey. The fact of Rutgers, and not only just Bailey, right? It's Dylan Harper, too. They had both players. They had number 2 and number 3, essentially. Yep, there you go. Dylan Harper up on screen. Number 2 and number 3, and they couldn't make the NCAA tournament. They couldn't be a relevant team. That's definitely, I'm looking at that with the side eye. So definitely with Ace Bailey, and there's just, to me, in interviews, sometimes you hear players talk and you go, are they the most intelligent beings, right? Are they going to be able to actually over time develop that maturity and develop that basketball intellect to be able to stay in the league over the course of a decade plus in a competitive league? That's another thing too with some of these prospects, is just the competitiveness of the prospect. That's why Cooper Flagg, there's a lot of appeal with Cooper Flagg, the competitiveness. Others, you see an Ace Bailey, and we'll get to some others here in this draft as well. It seems as if it's like, oh, they're already entitled to something. They've already earned something, when the only thing they're getting drafted into the NBA. It's like, congratulations, you've walked through the door. Now climb this mountain. It's like that's a general concern I have with some players in the draft every single year. Anytime you're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old players, that's always going to be a concern, is what type of personality do they turn into in time. But that is something I look at specifically with Ace Bailey at the top of the draft. If I'm being completely honest, if I look at the personalities of Cooper Flagg, VJ Edgecombe, Con Knipple, even Malawach, those guys, I don't think it compares to Ace Bailey. I think those guys are just up here, and he's a little lower than that. And it's not to say you can't get up to that level, but where they're starting from, I would rather have those guys as personalities in the locker room. And sometimes we look at the skill. Ace Bailey can have all the skill, but doesn't have the personality. Sometimes that can be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah, well, I have a question for you too, from a coaching perspective, Coach AJ, about, if you're an NBA coach, and you take this in the college perspective as well, and if you're looking at a player and he doesn't show up for any workouts, are you willing to take that risk on him? And just like it from a college perspective too, if like you have this guy that's committed to your school and isn't doing any of the workouts to see what you could see from him, are you gonna take the risk on him? What's your perspective from that though?
Yeah, I mean, from the college level, anytime we deal with something like that, I'm not the biggest fan for it, because it's more than just you in that realm. So for me, anytime if someone, we were recruiting something, I want to come for a visit, but they kept blowing us off, or at some point they were kind of more radio silence with us during the recruiting process, we kind of just get up and just move on. So if you take that realm into the professional ranks, when I was in college, I was given an incredible opportunity in one of my classes. We got to go sit down with Joe Dumars when he was the GM of the Detroit Pistons. And we walked in there, and there's this massive board. It's their draft board. And it's them identifying who they're keeping an eye on. But, he talked about the draft process and what they do. A lot of the security people that work for them are former FBI agents, or people that have that well-known background to where they can do lots of digging on you to find just any little thing that they might say, if we get them in a meeting, we got to ask them about this. For example, Joe Dumars said it was, I think, the summer leading into, I think it was Andre Drummond they drafted. I can't remember what it was, but when they brought him in, they had a massive stack of papers. And what it was like just social media posts that he had. And they're just like, hey, what were you thinking here? Or what was your thoughts to when you hit this? So again, him canceling all these meetings is just, you just don't see it. And again, I think there's just the wrong ears. I know Seamus was saying, like, you know, looking at these other guys and seeing like the potential value they present. What you got to hope for Ace is, again, you want him to succeed. I think you want all these young men that get drafted to succeed. I mean, this is their dream. They've chased their whole lives. You just got to hope wherever he goes to, there is a veteran or there is somebody that can be in the presence of him and just pull him aside. You hear about some of these guys that come in with a little bit of rough edges, and they'll talk about like, hey, I got, you know, selected or I got placed with a veteran that was like, I was like their rookie that they were assigned to. And like, you'll hear the stories about how they might say, hey, you're here every day at this time. Hey, you're doing this to really instill like accountability. And I think that's the biggest thing with Ace. Like, I don't think he's truly been held to an accountability or a standard because he's walked in every gym growing up. He's been the best player. A lot of people argued last year in high school, like, is it him or Cooper Flagg as the best player in the country? So again, I just think from the lack of maturity standpoint, you hope that, you know, and maybe him slipping and falling might mature him a little bit. I mean, it's a totally different comparison in a way because I think they're two different people, but this is kind of giving me that Shedeur Sanders kind of vibe, where I think there's a turnoff with how he is in these meetings or like any conversations that they're getting about him to where he might get humbled tomorrow night, and who knows, he could dip even lower than what they expect. But you also could look at a team like, do they see the opportunity where like a team that's like in the middle teens, and it's wild for me to say this, but does Sam Presti look at this and be like, hey, there's a lot of red flags. You bring him into a team that can really humble him as a former team that just won a championship, surround him with guys that know how to win and do it the right way. He could throw in like 3 or 4 draft picks and say, I'm just going to move up and I'll take a flyer on him. We saw it with Denver and Michael Porter Jr. doing this. So I just think like that could be a scenario you could get, but I just hope the best for him. And again, I think he might get a little humble pie tomorrow, but what veterans, what presence is going to be in that organization once he steps foot in those doors?
Yeah, totally. No, I agree with what you just said right there too. And you know, it's just a fact that thinks he's at the top. And I feel like he's one of those players in this draft that is going to get humbled very fast. But Seamus, you asked, you have a question for this fella right here, if you wanted to mention.
Well, this is a pretty interesting story in which is developing within the draft news circles here. Noah Esenge will miss the German League Finals to attend the NBA draft. So Noah Esenge, who is playing in the German League Finals right now, and I talked about this yesterday on a live, how, you know, everybody's seasons, whether you're playing overseas in a domestic league or playing in college basketball, everybody's seasons end at different times. So, you know, whether you're in China, whether you're somewhere in Europe, or even here in the United States playing college ball, everybody's seasons ends at different times. Well, Noah Esenge in the German league, their finals this week, right? He's playing in the finals. He has left the finals, left the team for the NBA draft. And so my question here is, does the move signal a lack of competitiveness in Noah Esenge, or are we overreacting to this? And does this kind of move cause concern over a player's mentality and personality, period? Because you think this player, he's going into a competitive league. This doesn't seem like a very competitive move for a guy who's now going into the NBA, who will have to carve himself out a spot in the NBA, who's likely going somewhere mid-first round, late first round. But what do you guys think of this? Does this kind of move cause concern for a player's mentality and personality, and specifically for Esenge's draft stock?
Griffin, I'll let you take the lead on that one.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm gonna say no, because I think it's and it's definitely a conversation, but I think it's a big honor to be drafted in the NBA, and this is very a life-changing moment, you know, and for him to be able to get this opportunity and you know, go out there and hear his name being called, I think that's a big opportunity. And yes, that could cause him to slip because, you know, he has a commitment, and as a player you need to do that commitment. So it's definitely mixed for me. I don't have a lot to say on it because I feel like, it's the NBA. It's your life. It's your dreams. It's what you've wanted and what you've worked hard for, So it's bittersweet. But what are your thoughts, Coach? I really don't have much on this. I just learned about it just recently.
Yeah, I think it's definitely hit or miss pertaining to, whoever brings up the opinion there. Like, you could have some interesting people talking, being like, hey, like, potentially winning the championship in this Euro League team, to where, like, hey guys, we made this great run, but I'm gonna dip out for a little bit. If you guys win, awesome, but I'll be back if we're still alive and all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for him. I was trying to think of, like, somewhere in that similar boat, and what it was is, like, I was thinking of, I'm gonna throw a name out here. You guys maybe have forgot Frank Ntilikina. You guys remember him? The
Frankie
France.
Smokes.
Yeah,
Frankie
Frankie
Smokes in
Smoke.
New
That's
York.
exactly what it was. I just, like, when Griffin, you were talking, I let you leave because I was like, I need to do a little digging because I feel like we've had an international guy do this. Now, Frank Ntilikina just finished his playoff run and got to New York like less than 24 hours after his season ended. So as soon as they won the championship, like, he dipped out immediately. But the one thing that's going to be interesting, though, is, with these international guys, their contracts over there are unique. Like, there are buyout clauses that are set in there. So you just don't know if the owner gets upset with this move, he could say, hey, I'm going to up, you now owe us this much money. Whoever drafts him, like, you got to pay us this much money to buy out his contract. So there is going to be maybe that leverage piece that those European teams now, or that owner or GM of the team, could say, like, all right, you're going to leave us in the middle of our championship run to go get drafted. Hey, I'm happy for it. That's great. But the buyout now just got increased, or maybe double, or something like that, for a fee standpoint.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this move whatsoever. Because I believe it's more of a move pertaining to oneself than one's team. I want to see unselfishness within guys, right? I want to see, coming into the league, I want to see players who are about their team. It's about we, not me. And this is a move to me that just seems a little bit more me than we. And I don't know what the whole situation was overseas. It could be he doesn't like the coach, he doesn't like the players. They still might be in a good situation, but the relationships might be rancid. It could be something like that that goes on over there. But I'm not a huge fan of playing an entire season, making it to a point in which we all know. I mean, when you're on a competitive roster, I mean, when you're building up to a certain goal with a group of brothers, and then you get to that goal, if one of them just dips out and leaves right before that, I mean, how's the rest of the group supposed to feel about that? And if Noah Singh, this is another thing too. It could be mentioned with Ace Bailey as well. Maybe it's not necessarily a Singh, maybe it's not necessarily Bailey making these questionable decisions before the draft. It could be their representation behind the scenes, their agents, their parents, whoever is representing them behind the scenes. Could be any of them. But ultimately, uh, this this right here, I'm not a huge fan of leaving one's team, especially at the precipice of potentially winning something that they're all competing for. And if somebody is just this comfortable with leaving a situation, right, in the German league finals, like, no matter what level you're at, I mean, coach, you know this, you want to be as competitive as humanly possible to actually get to that next level, right? You want to set the standard and the tone to get better than where you're at currently. And for me, if he is leaving his team in the German league finals, what does that signal for when his team is in a tough NBA playoff series later on down the line? Say they're down 3-2 in a series like the Indiana Pacers were. Is he going to show up for that game 6, or is he going to have the mentality of, oh, well, I mean, we're down 3-2. It's like, oh, we're beating this series. Like, what kind of mentality is he actually going to have? Like, he was just able to leave a competitive situation for his own endeavors, which I understand people are going to give out the take of, yes, it's his moment, it's a big moment, people dream of this. I understand that, but he's also obligated. I believe he's obligated to his teammates. He's obligated to his coaches. He's obligated to that organization overseas, and he's just foregoing that obligation for himself.
I think we lost Seamus really quick there. Is he glitching on your end too?
Just the mic was muffling a little bit. I was still able to understand him, but there's
Yeah.
that little muffle on that. Yeah, I mean, Seamus makes great points on that. I mean, and one thing too, I was just looking at his background. Like, he is playing like in Germany. He is from France, so like you wonder too, like if maybe if this is like a France pro league, like does he have more of like, hey, this is my home country, I will stay. The other thing too, while Seamus was thinking that, it just made me wonder, like, obviously this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Was he given a promise by a team saying, hey, we're going to draft you if you are here? Like, I just looked at the ESPN mock draft. They have him going to Toronto. So you just don't know, did Toronto give him a promise, or whoever said, like, hey, if you're there, we're taking you? It's a good talking point. I'm sure it'll be a talking point tomorrow when his name does get called on that. And I'll be curious to see if he does get interviewed, to kind of, because they will ask him that question.
Oh, definitely. Well, talking about him too, we have some other questions too that for you. But for player evolution, from a coaching perspective, what characteristics do you look at within a player when evaluating potential additions and to your program? What do you see from that as a player? Obviously talking about this draft, and everyone's young, they're used to college basketball, and now going into a lot different environment. What do you see from that perspective, obviously from a coaching perspective?
Yeah, I love the question. It's, when we're recruiting a young man, we obviously know from a talent perspective, he could play for us. We view him as a fit for us. But outside of the playing piece, a lot of it is like, hey, what we kind of want to know, like, what type of kid are you? What is your personality? It sounds crazy when you see it. It's like when I go to watch a young man play that we are recruiting, again, from a talent perspective, I know you can play. There's obviously a reason why we're recruiting you, and probably many other colleges are recruiting you. I say this to the kids I recruit, and some of the kids that end up committing to us, is like, when I go to watch you play, like, yes, I want you to play well, but honestly, I'm actually more eager if you're kind of struggling. Like, I kind of want to see you go through some adversity in a game. I want to see how you react when adversity hits. What type of teammate are you still going to be? Are you still coachable? Are you able to kind of push out the negativity of what's going on with you in the game? And are you still more about the team? That stuff. How are you on the bench when you are not in the game? Are you still cheering teammates on when it's not going your way? Again, I'm not wanting like bad things to happen or those negativity things, but like, you really get a sense of like identity in who they really are as a person. But again, more often than not, like, it's weird for me to say that, but everyone's got different philosophy from the college ranks from standpoints. But I always look at it as like, if I'm recruiting you, I know you can fit for us from a talent level, but I'm also going to come see you because I want to see who you are and those other characteristics, and do you fit into our culture and what our program is. That's the one thing I can say with a lot of pride with SMCC's basketball program, is that, the culture is so great. It's very unique. We kind of say, like, you're one of two guys. You're either a chemistry creator or you're an energy sucker. If you're an energy sucker, you ain't going to last very long. And kind of in a way, like Ace Bailey, his tendencies right now, he's an energy sucker. You don't want to be around guys like that. But then you look at a guy like a Cooper Flagg, that's a chemistry creator. So we look for guys that can be those chemistry creators. Now, you could come in and maybe start as an energy sucker, but you can change. And you are outnumbered by those chemistry creators. So, like, you're kind of like adapt or evolve. But that's a lot of things that, myself, Matt Richards on our staff, our other assistants, we look at those attributes, and we utilize any resource. Like, are there any connections that, hey, do we know maybe a former player of ours? Is he from that same hometown? Like, let's give him a call. Like, does he know any more background information? So it's kind of doing some due diligence on your end. But ultimately, it's like, again, you could play for us. You fit for us there. What are you as a person? Because I also got to be with you outside the playing court. And for me, it's like, do you fit into what we try to do, not just as a basketball program, but as like an ambassador of the college? Like, can you be a proud representative of our athletic department as well?
Well, you said that perfectly right there. And I think that's a great example for what players need, what coaches and organizations need to feel while going into this NBA draft, because there's a lot of new faces, and it's like, this is how you build for the future. These drafts are what is the future of the NBA and what's being held at place. Sometimes you're going to have a draft where there's not many players that you see down the road that you're like, all right, they had such an impact on a team. However, I feel like this is a very great draft where you're going to see plenty of those faces where you're like, all right, they could impact the game well for us. And there's a lot of those faces, but you all already kind of covered it. But the second question is, what type of character or personality traits do you like to see within a player? Obviously, from your own coaching perspective, and from an NBA standpoint as well. Like, what do they want to see when drafting a player? What personality traits do they want to see and character traits?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the the NBA, a lot of PR stuff there. Like, can you be someone that can be a face of our franchise, or are you kind of the one where it's like you're a little bit more of the introverted side, and not really want to put yourself out there and have the cameras in front of you, but still want to do a lot of good causes, awarenesses, and all that stuff there. I think a lot of it too is like, I'm looking at the list of guys here, and the face I just see like right off the jump that I'm just thinking of from like the characteristic standpoint that I think is a big talking point in this is like Con Knippel. He had a unique role where he was asked, hey, Cooper's our guy. He kind of stepped in and became that number 2 guy. But when Cooper went down, he had no issues stepping up, being the guy, is the MVP of the ACC tournament, and really emerged himself afterwards, being like, hey, like, I do belong here. Like, I'm not just that, again, Duke gets a lot of that token white guy type thing where, hey, I'm just a knockdown shooter. He really showed like other things that he can provide in that. But going back to the characteristics things that you were saying, like, I just think like there's so many things just outside of the game. Like, obviously winning is the most important thing for this professional ranks. But I think they're also one to make sure that they have the right individuals in there. You don't want to bring in the knuckleheads. You don't want to bring in the guys that are high maintenance, that you just are unsure if they're still going to be around. Like, it's just more of like, in this draft process they do it's so unique. It's such a deep dive. They'll pull things out from 5, 10, 15 years ago that they wouldn't be expected to be asked, but they kind of just really want to know, like, who are we bringing in this organization, and are they going to be the right person? Or, as I said about our program at SMCC, are they going to be a chemistry creator, whether it's through the good, the in-between, or bad days that they go through with us? Like, can they be reliable and held to that standard?
No, well said. And I love the mention that you just threw in there as well, because he was the option when, obviously, you said when Cooper went down, he was that guy. And that's what a lot of players in this draft can really give to a team. My next question, though, is what examples could you extract from time as a head coach of a player showing winning characteristics? Obviously, you said that winning mentality, that's what people want in the NBA. And from this draft, they want to find a player that can help them win and, have success within the program and become this player that they're like, all right, we see him down the road. This is a guy who really helped us in that, factor. Same question kind of, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you one. I mean, he's familiar with this podcast. Andrew Quinn, we call him Quinny.
Co-host on here, yep.
Quinny is one of the guys that will take a shirt off his back for you to help you out. But he's also the same guy. If I told Quinny, hey, I need you to run through that brick wall for me, he's going to do everything he can in his power to run through that brick wall. And like, his role was very unique. Like, there were some games where like he started for us, played significant minutes in the game, but then there'd be games he might be a DMP. But what I loved about him is that his demeanor never changed. He would come talk to us, kind of get perspective, like, hey, what do I need to do to get better at, to prepare myself for these opportunities? So Quinny, for me, in the last couple of years, he's one of those guys where it's like, when I think of like an SMCC, like what's a culture guy, it's Quinny to a T. The other example I can give to you is, this past season, obviously we talked a little bit about, we had a young man join us second semester, but practiced with us in the first semester, though, was Nathan Mugisha. 6'7" wing from Rwanda, has a really promising future ahead of him. When he joined us in the second semester, it really gave us like this punch that we needed to really get over the top and be this team night in and night out as a true top team in our conference. We had a game on the road. He came off the bench for us, but was playing really well. Our starting four-man, Charlie Houghton, was in some foul trouble, was playing good for us in spurts, but just continuously kept picking up fouls at the wrong time. And he picked up his fourth foul about midway through the second half. And, Nate went back in the game after taking a quick breather. And Nate really got going, hitting some shots for us, getting some stops, having some blocks that led to us getting some offensive opportunities that we took advantage of. But his presence on both sides of the floor was the difference in that game. And I remember about the 6-minute mark, call a timeout, guys go out, and I said to Chuck, hey, be ready. Just be ready. And he literally said this, and the maturity out of him to do this, I'm so proud of, still so proud of this moment that he said. He looked at me and said, ride Nate until you need me. Play him until he fouls out. And he had 3 fouls at the time and picked up his 4th. So he was ready to go. But he said, hey, ride Nate until he can't go no more. And I'll be ready. So those are the kind of things that you kind of look for in that end. I'm sure you can look at some other guys in the league. They can probably talk about hey, there's moments where a guy's feeling it, playing well. Hey, keep going with that guy. In a way, Halliburton goes down. Again, we're talking about the Pacers example here just recently, but TJ McConnell, that guy, he literally gets paid millions of dollars just to outwork you. How do you not want a guy like that in your franchise and on your team? He is just a winner. Kind of in a way, it's like what Quinny is. It's he's going to do whatever you ask him to do, and he's going to go 110% every single time on that.
And I agree. I feel like that's why there was so much emotion behind him when they lost, because like you said, when Halliburton went out, he was very emotional because him and Matherin, I thought, did a fantastic job on giving it all and leaving it all on the court. They gave everything they had. And that is that the type of player that you want to see in a program, just the player that's gonna I look at this, and I think a lot of coaches have this perspective too. Obviously, players are talented. We'll use Ace Bailey for this example. Ace Bailey, very talented. He's a very good player. However, you have a player who obviously, we'll use Cooper Flagg in this example, but pretend he's not as good. But if he's going to give you that energy night in and night out, and he's going to give you that 100% effort and give you everything you got, you're drafting Cooper Flagg over Ace Bailey just because the fact that he's going to give you everything he has. Ace Bailey at times could probably, become slouch on that end, because he's cocky. He has that raw talent. However, the person that's going to give you all and everything, like TJ McConnell, and you have that player who is going to give you everything they have. Yeah, they might not be able to have the talent like a Halliburton and can shoot his way out of a slump and shoot his way back into a game, but he's going to be physical and fast and give you everything from his perspective and what he could bring to the court. And I look at that, and that's a good example but is that the type of player that you value over any other player? And I just want to hear that perspective from a coaching standpoint, because obviously, and I've even dealt with this issue sometimes when coaching baseball for Babe Ruth and stuff. You have a player who's very talented, but also not the best, mentality. However, you have a player who doesn't have the same talent, but is going to give you everything he has, and he's going to leave it all on the field or court at the end of the day. What's your thoughts, though?
Yeah. I mean, it's, you're talking a little bit about what you were just saying there, and I was thinking of too, like Gorgie Jang. I know Celtics fans are probably I don't know how I really feel about him. I've always been a big fan of him, even when he was in college at Iowa State. He just makes winning plays, and I think that's a big separator. And a lot of it goes to his IQ standpoint, but the separation there that you see in just those small winning plays. Those are the guys you want, a part of your organization, a part of your team. You're talking about Ace Bailey and all those things that he can do. Yes, he is a terrific scorer, dynamic scorer, really, to put it that way. But like when he's not shooting the ball well or scoring, can he make his other guys around him better? And I think like going back to, we're saying with him and Cooper, I think the big difference is that Cooper can make guys around him better, elevates their games. Whether that's like on the offensive end, defensive end, like he has this uniqueness where I think so many guys, and you're seeing so many veterans in the NBA and they're on their podcasts or shows speaking so highly of Cooper because they know what it takes to win. I know Kevin Garnett is all in on Cooper because I think he sees so much in him from the competitiveness, but also too knowing that like I see a lot of me in him because he just wants to win. He's going to do whatever it takes to win. Doesn't matter if he scores 4 points, 30 points, 15 rebounds, or 5. He's going to do whatever it takes there. And I just think that that's a niche. Like either you have that toughness factor to you or you don't. So I think, again, going back to the Ace Cooper thing, I think that's like really a big separator there. But from a coaching standpoint, like you can't ever have enough of those guys. And I use the example again, talking about Quinny. I wish he was on the pod today to be hearing this, but like, you really try to possess those young men and young women too that play the game where it's like you don't want to let them go because you just know the value that they bring. And I think that's why you see a lot of guys like the TJ McConnells, the Gorgie Jangs, like those ones, like they know they're not the most talented, but they're going to outwork you. They're going to be tougher than you. And they're just going to do all the little things that are just going to help you win and get over the top.
Oh, 100%. And I think in Boston too, and obviously you have more of a Pistons perspective, and Pistons players, they have that tough, style on the court and whatever. Sorry,
going to work mentality is what they called it.
They really do. But I feel with Celtics too, it's the fan perspective too. The fans are, they set you to a high standard in Celtics. So they're going to hold them accountable. And they're going to be like, all right, well, we gave up a big center for you, a guy who could shoot the three well, obviously has some injury concerns. But at the same time, they're going to hold him accountable and be like, hey, you need to give us some production. And I if you could get that TJ McConnell type player out of there that's going to give it your all, not slouch, I think Celtics fans will be impressed with that. But back to the draft too, and I love that comparison that you have too. But draft prep, kind of looking to prep for the draft. Obviously, we're on the draft miss eve or whatever you want to call it, the NBA draft happening tomorrow. How do you believe players should approach the draft and the season behind the scenes? How do you think that should go about? Obviously, you were a player in high school who, you were going into college and everything. How do you think, just from, obviously you being a college coach and say there was an NBA ready talent, how do you think they should, prepare behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think too, like as you go up into higher levels, going from high school to college, then when you get to like the pros and like all that stuff, it's, what is it that you are very, very good at? And how can you just maximize that strength for you? For someone like me, my biggest strength was my shooting ability. So it was more of like, hey, in high school, play at a smaller school, so I was able to, get my shot off. But like knowing when I got to college, it's like, hey, I'm playing bigger, faster, stronger guys. Like, how can I prepare myself to where that game's gonna be much quicker? How can I get my shot off in a quicker opportunity there? So more, it's like perfecting like the crafts that you are very strong, dominant in. Like, again, he's going to be Cooper's teammate, but Klay Thompson. When you watched him in college, dude was an all-around scorer for them. That's why he got drafted so high. But his shooting ability is what was the separator for him. And that's what he really focused on. I mean, you could look back. He had so many infamous games where he scored 50, almost 60 points and would take less than 10 dribbles. You can go down the line. Like current Lakers coach, J.J. Redick, was similar to that too from his shooting ability. So it's more for these guys that get prepared. It's like knowing what your strengths are and taking advantage of those and preparing yourself for to be excellent at that professional level. But also too knowing like, hey, self-reflect a little bit. What are your weaknesses? Like what are some intangibles that maybe you are kind of lacking that teams are going to expose you to? Because again, when you get to the NBA, a lot of it's going to be more about the matchups. Who can be exposed in what way? Like like Malwatch, the kid from Duke, like great defender, can alternate shots. How can he defend when he gets dragged out 30 feet away? And now you're having to guard. You get switched on to Anthony Edwards, or you get switched on to like, one of these elite athletes that can just change at the flight of just the dribble itself. So it's really more of just like seeing like who can step in right away with what their strengths are and how can they continuously improve themselves and just love the process. Again, we're being from Maine, both of us, with Cooper, he just loves the process of just constantly getting better. So I think too, I'll say it's going back to our guys a little bit and kind of with the pros. You'll notice it with some of the pros, and you hear them talk about sometimes on podcasts or the shows. You're one of two guys. You either love to play basketball or you like to play basketball. There's a difference. I mean, it's not much from like the word standpoint, but like if you love to play basketball, like it is your passion. Like that's all you are thinking about. That's what you're wanting to do. Versus guys that like basketball, you could probably tell in the league which guys, hey, I think they like to play basketball. So I think that's the big thing too when you get to pro level is that the love versus like attributes, like it's the sheer massive difference in what separates a lot of these guys from being outstanding NBA players to all-time greats, all-stars, MVPs versus guys that are just mediocre role players, but just love the money and fame.
Oh, totally. Keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off right there.
No, you're good.
Yeah, no, but my last question from a coaching perspective, and then we get into a little more draft and then the trades, is my last question is obviously from the college perspective too. They play a lot less games than 82 games in the NBA and a long postseason if it comes down to that. And, for a lot of these guys, summer league, then 82 games. How do players have to prepare and train for that? And even from a college perspective, because, you go from high school not playing as good talent. Sometimes that could be different, but not playing as good talent coming into the league, playing better talent. How do you prepare from that? And what does the off-season training kind of look like from a college perspective? And for these guys going into the NBA, how does that training come into play preparing for an 82-game season?
Yeah, the biggest thing is, the big two things I always see, and I say it's a lot to our guys when it comes to season. Like when our season ends, I tell them, guys, don't touch a basketball for like 2 weeks. It's okay. The pros do it. It's okay. But when you're in season, you're preparing for that long stretch of, for us, we typically play 30 to 35 games, depending on how successful we are in the postseason. But obviously with those NBA guys, they play 82. First thing is like just the nutrients, what you're putting in your body to perform at the highest level. The other thing too is just like the maintenance that you do to your body from like the recovery standpoint. I wish now that I've gotten older, I wish I would have taken advantages when I was playing in college. But man, yoga is such a game changer for our guys. They actually look forward to it on our recovery days. Typically, we play like a Wednesday, Saturday is what most often a lot of college basketball schedules are. But during that midweek game, the next day is probably film breakdown of the game last night, or maybe it's like, hey, quick clips of what we saw, what we got to get better at. And then we're kind of shifting our focus to our next opponent a little bit, just so they can kind of get a feel and idea. But then we'll do like 45 minutes of just yoga with them. And it really just helps their bodies from the long tenures of the season on that standpoint. So I think those two things are the biggest things that really prepare you. But again, we talk about these rookies, like this going from a 30 to 40 game season to where you're now doubling that. Like by the time you get to New Year's, you've almost played equivalent of a college season already. And we say it to our guys all the time when they start with us as freshmen. You will play equivalent of a high school season before you get to Christmas, before you go home. So it is a grind. It's just unfortunate that we're seeing a lot of these significant injuries take place in the NBA. And I know the big talking points right now are like, should it be shortened? Should the CBA really reevaluate this? And it's just, I think it's a lot of unluckiness that's taken place, but also too, the speed of the game has changed drastically in the last 30 years. If you go back and watch a game from the 90s and then immediately watch a game from like the last year or so, I'll put it this way. Watch a Boston Celtics game from the 90s and then watch the Celtics from the last couple of years. The speed of the game is just so much different. So like the toll that these guys are putting on their bodies, it definitely in the long run sustains some potential travesty-like injuries. Like you've seen Dame, Tatum, now Halliburton all go down with Achilles, but you're seeing like other injuries too that just linger, and then it's just only inevitable. So you want the health and safety of all these guys when they're in the season, but I think a lot of it too is like, what are you doing in the offseason to prepare yourself for the grind? LeBron's got all the money in the world, but he spends like almost like $3 million on his body just in the offseason. So like he's really prepared himself, and the longevity, and we will never ever see a guy like LeBron. And again, I know Celtics fans are listening to this. I know LeBron's not the biggest fan, or you like to talk about, but you got to give the dog his due. Like, guy's going into year 22 of the league, and he's never had a significant injury because he's done his job on his end to take care of himself from the maintenance standpoints and recovery.
Well, I have a bone to pick with you because I was going to say LeBron is that main guy. If you watch Starting Five too, have you watched Starting Five, that NBA Netflix one?
I am in this rare entity right now where I do not have Netflix. I haven't had Netflix for a couple years, but many people have told me about this, that I need to watch this.
Yes. And I see, that's why it blew me away, because he talks a lot about his recovery in the off season, and people think it's weird and stuff, but he shows it a lot, and it shows how he is so durable. And obviously my internship with the Sea Dogs, we just moved the clubhouse. They have a brand new clubhouse, and just seeing their training facilities, seeing the ice baths, and them after, there was a player that was on rehab, and right after his start, he went and had some physical therapy done, and just getting work done right after a start or right after a game. And just taking care of your body is the way to, and that's why, again, there's so many injuries, because I think they need to go with a similar route that LeBron went with, and be overprotective about your body, really take care of it and do what you got to do. I feel like a big thing with LeBron too is he doesn't see his family a lot, because whether it's, taking care of his body on the off season or working to develop his game, there's some sacrifices you have to make. But if you do it the right way, you could really develop into a great player and be very durable. Obviously, you already mentioned it, Tatum, Dame, and Halliburton all going out with Achilles tear. And that's just so devastating. But I do have a question regarding that. And then we go into the last talks about the draft and then some trades. But what were your thoughts? Obviously, the Dame one, and then Tatum, that tough one. Do you think he can make a bounce back after that Achilles tear, being in the heart of his prime? And then Halliburton goes out when he's not even, I'd say he's creeping towards the prime, but he's not exactly in the heart of his prime like Tatum is. What are your thoughts? Do you think they could recover from that? And do you see Dame's career being over? What are your thoughts? We haven't talked about this. I know I look forward to our classes when we talk about all this breaking news, and geez, it's been a long time and we haven't talked about any of this. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are.
I mean, for Dame, I think unfortunately, like, he was at the tail end of his prime. As a guy, as you get into your 30s and you have an injury like that, the recovery time is going to probably take a little bit longer than what it will be for a younger guy like a Tatum and Halliburton. The way that science is now today, I think the recovery, I think Tatum and Halliburton are going to be just fine. It's just for Dame, unfortunately, I think he's just a little bit on the older side. I think the biggest optimism that I think a lot of Celtics fans probably immediately thought of when Tatum went down is, when Kevin Durant had the injury, that was a pretty devastating moment in his career. And when he came back, like, he was still like in his prime, nothing has changed. But he took the proper time off and waited until he was ready. That's the biggest thing. I hope Tatum and Halliburton, those guys, especially being younger, I hope they take the advice from like a KD or other guys that have had injuries like this, saying, hey, don't rush yourself. Like KD, when it happened to him, he took all of that following year off.
Do you think that same route for them? Like Tatum, there's some talks if the Celtics could push a playoff run, they're like, oh, bring Tatum back. I think he should sit out the whole next season. What are your thoughts on that?
I think for Tatum, I think it's best take the whole year. And then, like, if there's an opportunity where it's like, maybe if there's like U.S. games or like Team USA's they're doing some like, I think there's like every in between, like, I think it's next summer. I think they have like their World Cup or whatever it is. Like, if he wants to be a part of that, awesome, go for it. I think the same thing for Halliburton too. But in a lot of ways, in a different comparison from the Detroit sports world being my hometown, who I root for is like when Aiden Hutchinson went down with his leg injury. Lions were making getting ready for their playoff run, and there was conversation like, oh, if the Lions make the Super Bowl, he'd be clear. Like, in my head, I'm like, why? Like, I get it's a Super Bowl, but like, why risk it? Like, you're coming off a broken leg. You're not going to be 100%. You might be cleared, but like, you're still not going to be the same Aiden Hutchinson that you would be. I think Tatum and Halliburton are in the same boat. Like, now Tatum's injury was a few weeks earlier, and if they get into a playoff run, let's say they make a run to the finals next year, I can see Tatum maybe dressing, suiting up. Like, I could see Missoula and Brad Stevens be like, yeah, you can dress, but like, we ain't playing you. But if you want to have your presence on the bench to maybe instoke a little fear to the opposing team, like, go for it. But I think it's best for those guys just to take the year. For Dame, I'm a big Dame guy. I've always liked Dame Lillard. I was actually thrilled when he came to Milwaukee because I loved watching him when he was in Portland. But us East Coast guys, it's hard to stay up for those kind of games late at night.
Totally.
So it's just unfortunate that's just in such the latter part of the career. And it just puts the Bucks in a bind because I don't know what they do right now. Because I think they were hoping that him and Dame and Giannis could really make one last run together at a championship. But now with that injury, like, he's probably never going to be the same guy. Won't be able to move. His shooting ability will still be the same. Can you make that be serviceable? Maybe you haven't played a little off ball. You don't know. So we'll be interesting to see how he adapts his game being an older presence compared to a younger ones like Tatum and Halliburton.
Oh, definitely. And just a thought, do you think, obviously, like, the need to succeed and, that dire need for Halliburton to play out there for Game 7 when he already had that calf strain and wanting to compete and wanting to bring that championship back to Indiana, do you think he should have sat out the rest of the series? Or do you think that was a move that, all right, like, he did it, and I don't think he would say no. Like, I don't think he would ever change that. What are your thoughts, though?
I think if I was in his shoes, I would have done the same thing. I would have played. I think a lot of us would have said it's Game 7. Like, I'm not sitting out. Like, yeah, you're potentially putting yourself at risk, and it's unfortunate that the injury happened. But as a former athlete, and you obviously play sports too. When that adrenaline's pumping.
I think I lost you for a second right here. Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi was in and out. If you don't mind just re-saying that tape.
What I was gonna say is, for Halliburton, like, if I was him, I would have played. If you were in his shoes, you would have played. I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I'm playing. It's Game 7. Like, I'm not sitting out on this, knowing that there's an injury risk. And every single guy, whether it was no calf strain or not, like, you're always putting yourself at risk for an injury. But I think he made the right decision. I would say this. Yes, OKC won the NBA title this year in that Game 7. But you're always going to speculate, what if Halliburton does not get hurt?
You are.
OKC potentially maybe still wins. It'll be a lot of further down the road, people are going to be like, yeah, OKC won the title in 2025, but everybody's going to remember Halliburton going down 7 minutes into the game with the Achilles. Does Indiana complete that kind of Cinderella run on their end to win it all? So I don't fault him. I think he's got no regrets. I feel bad for him because he was on such a great run, hitting all these game winners in clutch moments. Being rated as like the overrated player according to the player survey and really proving those doubters wrong. I hope he comes back, but I think down the road he'll never regret playing that Game 7.
I don't think so either. And I think this whole postseason is a big what if, with Dame obviously going down, Tatum going down against the Knicks. It's definitely a big what if. But kind of moving away from that, back to the draft for a second. This is my last kind of take on the draft. Well, two more actually about the draft is you said you've done some mock drafts. Do you have like the top 10? Like, do you have that kind of set out what you believe it will be?
Yeah, I've messed around a little bit now, knowing there's been another trade. I feel like I'll probably do another one beforehand. I think it's pretty clear as day who number one, who number two is going to be with Cooper and Dylan Harper. I said it earlier. I'll say it again. I really like VJ Edgecombe to Philly. I just think putting him next to Maxey in the backcourt, and you have Jared McCain, who would be coming off the bench, who is an absolute spark plug. The real question is going to be is what do they do with Paul George and what is Embiid? Embiid's kind of that mystery guy there. Charlotte, I don't know where you go with it. I mean, I don't know if you have any initial thoughts there on that, but I think you take the best available player in that scenario.
Yeah, I agree.
And then when you get to 5, I believe that's Utah. I think they're really big on Trey Johnson. I think Utah, them not being great the last couple of years, kind of tanking, all this stuff. I think you're going to see one more year where Utah is not going to be great because I think they have their eyes set on next year's draft and the prize possession there in AJ Debanta.
That could be a Celtics one after this move too with George Niang. You could. Never know. But I agree. Utah, they're going to want AJ Debanta.
Yeah. So I think if Trey Johnson's there, I think they take him. He's a knockdown shooter. I think he's going to be a great two-way guy. Maybe not two-way initially, but he's going to be a great two-guard that can be, a knockdown shooter that can really provide a spark for them on the offensive end. If Ace Bailey is still there at 6, I think this is where he goes to Washington. I think he wants to go to a place where it's a lot of he can get a lot of opportunities to score and kind of be what he wants to do. New Orleans, I got Jeremiah Fears going there, but again, Jeremiah Fears is a guy that could go to Charlotte. And if he goes to Charlotte, I think that means they're going to move on from LaMelo. So 4 through 7 really can get interesting there. Brooklyn, if he falls this far, I'd be a little surprised, but I think if Colin Knippel's there at 8, I think Brooklyn's going to take him. They kind of need that presence. I think, too, they're eventually going to move on from Cam Johnson, who's going to be a great trade target. Maybe could be a Celtic. Who knows? You know how Brad Stevens is in his office. That potentially could be something to keep an eye on. And then the last 2 picks, I think it's who do you got? Toronto. This could be Noah, like we talked about earlier from France, but I think this is where Malawach goes.
Got you. You obviously have him with Cooper right there.
Yeah, I think Malawach is again, he could go as high as 4, but I think he drops no lower than 9 to Toronto. I think at number 10, I said at the start of the podcast, I think this is Carter Bryant from Arizona. And I think this is the guy, if he reaches his potential and the ceiling that he can become as an NBA player, I think he's the guy 10 years from now when they do a redraft, he's one of the first guys in the redraft taken. I'm super high on him and what he can provide. So that's kind of the 10 I see going right there. Again, seeing how all these trades are happening, Griffin, man, you just never know. I think it's going to be a fun draft going into the summer off season, leading into next season.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of the most fun drafts that we've had in recent years. This is a lot action-packed, especially with the trades, a bunch of trades being held before the finals were even over. But the last question is, we already kind of brushed up on it a little bit at the beginning, but who do you think the Celtics get with that 28th pick? Do you think a guy like Danny Wolf could fall that far? Or obviously we talked about Broom, or even maybe Walter Clayton? What are your thoughts? Who do you think the Celtics get, though, with that 28th pick, if you had to guess?
The guy, again, I know they just traded Porzingis. You lost your 7-footer that could stretch the floor out, score from a shooting ability and all that. Man, if Maxime Renaud, if I'm saying his name right, the young man from Stanford, I think that's the guy. more and more I keep seeing other mock drafts, they see him going just before the Celtics. But man, watching him play a little bit this year, it's just like how the game is and what you need from centers. Like, I just think he is the perfect Celtic in that system and how they play and stretching the floor out. If not him, like, I think, the Fleming kid from St. Joe's, getting a lot of OG Anunoby comparisons with his length and what he can be. But again, you look at Walter Clayton, guy's a winner, kind of that Peyton Pritchard-like scorer that can just be a firecracker and like can go off for 30 if needed. I do think though, whoever they take here, like if it's not the Maxim, I'm saying his name correctly, if it's not him, whoever it is they take, I think it's a guy that we're going to see up in Portland a little bit.
No.
And I was going to ask you too, how many second round picks now have they gotten from these trades?
Geez, I don't know if it came out yet, like if it was this year or future ones, but I know as of right now they definitely have one, but they might have got Atlanta. Let me go do some research on it really quick because I'm curious what it is. But yeah,
those second round guys, I think a lot. If Brad Stevens has gotten some second round picks for this year's draft, I think that's a lot of the two-way guys that he's probably going to look at.
Yeah, because you see J.D. Davison getting that main contract with the Boston Celtics, no longer a two-way. And obviously you don't know if Miles Norris is going to re-sign or what's going on with that. And obviously Drew Peterson could be a potential two-way again. But, obviously if there's some picks in there, which I believe – I still don't know what year the picks are. I can't see it right now, but if it's several second round picks, then those could be guys where you're like, all right, we move on from a Drew Peterson and we have more two-way players rather than, just having the same guys come back in Miles Norris and Drew Peterson. You could definitely see them going with a route like that. I agree with you. I feel like the second rounders, you're definitely going to see play in Portland.
Yeah. And like, I know you said earlier about Danny Wolf. I don't think Danny Wolf's going to be available when the Celtics pick. I think
unless they trade up. That's the
unless they trade up. I got this weird feeling. I don't know why. I just see Danny Wolf going to the Miami Heat, and it allows them to slide Bam outside the center position.
Okay, this is going to be a clip to remember if that's the case.
I just every time like I've done a mock draft in the last few days, I get to Miami and I think that I don't know what pick it is they have. Hold up here 1 second. I think they have 20. I think it is. Yeah, I've done too many mock drafts and it shows then because it's like I knew right off the top of my head they had the 20th pick. I just got a weird feeling like it's just because again you got to figure out like what can you do to provide something that's a little bit unique, a little bit different, and you're seeing how the game is, like seeing what Danny Wolf was at Michigan, playing with him and the other 7-footer. Seeing that, I know Bam's not a 7-footer, but plays like he's 7 foot. I think you can maybe play those two guys together and allows Bam to get out of that center position. I don't think he's a center.
No, power forward.
I think he's a power forward, but can guard 1 through 5.
Yeah.
So
no, definitely. That's definitely an interesting one. Yeah, getting Danny Wolf, that would be it's one where that's going to be one to fall back on if it happens because, I don't think the Celtics get him. I feel like he goes a lot earlier in the draft. But I agree with what you said, especially after that Porzingis trade, getting a center is much needed now for the Boston Celtics. Obviously, now your center depth is non-existent because Luke Kornet is a free agent now. Same with Al Horford. And then you have Neemias Queta. That's the only center position you have for the Celtics. So they're going to have to get some players off the market. And maybe I think they bring back Luke Kornet, Al Horford. I think you see those guys coming back. But it's going to be interesting because now you need a third option, obviously getting Porzingis out of there. But that kind of wraps up the draft talk, but I do have some questions. Obviously, we talked about the trades, and the trades are crazy, and we didn't have a chance to talk about this before the NBA Finals wrapped up. You got this trade with Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Cole Anthony and 5 first round picks. What are your thoughts on that trade? And 5 first round picks, is that way overpriced for Desmond Bain, or do you think it was a payment for him and he could become instantly the Magic become a championship talk? What are your thoughts along those lines, though?
I actually really like this move for Orlando. It gives them that now true serviceable knockdown 3-point shooter. When the trade happened, you saw all those draft picks. Like, I think a lot of people were up in arms being like, 5 draft picks? Like, how's that? If you read into it, the reason why Orlando had to throw in that many draft picks is because it was trying to offset Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's contract in the deal. So that's why they had to throw in those 5 draft picks with Desmond Bain. You really look at it, like, Orlando potentially now could be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA now. You got Pablo, you got Fran Wagner. Desmond Bain is that perfect third guy to go along with these two. I was thinking about this too the other day. If you were to say, like, top 30 to 40 players in the league right now, do you think Desmond Bain's in that conversation?
I would say yes. I would say yes. Desmond Bain is an incredible piece, which he once was on the Grizzlies. Now he instantly is going to become a great scorer for the Orlando Magic, and he's a 3 shooter that the Orlando Magic needed. And I look at this trade, and I agree with you on that. I look at this, and the Magic are in win now. Those picks, obviously, they're going to help them down the line, but they're in win now mode. And Desmond Bain, the player that you just got, you don't need to develop him. He's already a developed player that can give you scoring from the 3. That's a player you look at, and it's like, wow, that was a good move, and that's going to help us in the win now. But what are your thoughts? Do you think he's a top 30, 40 player right now?
I think he is. Like, I think if you look at, like, kind of like, the whole mantra, I think it's kind of really starting to fade out now because of this whole second apron thing. But, like, you think about the big 3. If you think of some other teams now, like, obviously with the Celtics, when they had Tatum, Brown, Derek White, that's probably one of the best big 3s in the league. But I think Orlando now really has a lot to say to be like, we might actually have the best big 3 going into this upcoming season. I think also, too, them making this move, seeing the run that Indiana made, I think it provides a lot of hope for some of these franchises, too, being like, Indiana was a 4 seed. They started playing really well at the end of the season. Like, why can't that beat us? That's a small market. Like, why can't it be us? Like, we got guys like Paolo Banchero is eventually going to become a top 10 player in the league. It's just only a matter of when is that going to happen. I mean, Fran Wagner, I mean, he's unique, but he's a guy when he's healthy, like, he's going to be an issue for a lot of teams and how you defend him. So I think Bain just being inserted into that is going to really help them. Now the question is going to be is who's going to be your point guard? Who's going to be that guy? So Orlando might not be done making moves, but I also, too, wouldn't be surprised as does Orlando maybe try to draft a point guard now. Like, can they convert Clayton over to the point guard spot, or, like, does a Jace Richardson fall to them to play the point? But I do think they'll try to bring in maybe a serviceable vet to maybe play that one spot for them, to at least have that presence there for that. Again, Desmond Bain is still kind of young. But again, I think you see, like, that veteran presence can really be a catapult into a lot of team success for the younger guys to be surrounded by. I think that's what helped Indiana. It took a year longer than expected. When they had Pascal Siakam, that's an NBA caliber, all NBA guy, NBA champ, knows how to win, does all the right things. It just took a little bit longer for them to find that success this past season. So who knows? I really like the move for Orlando. I think as a Piston fan, it's unfortunate because I think they really jumped ahead of us now with that move. So, like I said, Griffin, it's gonna be a fun summer.
It definitely is, and you said it right there. But here was another trade, and there's a couple more to rack off as Kevin Durant, before the NBA Finals was even done. And I think that's the craziest part, is because we never see that really. You never see trades happening before the NBA Finals are done. But even talking about how does this affect the league, and you talk about your Pistons in there, obviously, obviously on the other side of the conference, but how does this Durant trade, affect the league? And do you see this being a successful trade now that Phoenix has 3 players on the same position with Devin Booker, Jalen Green, and Bradley Beal? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for the fact that Houston was able to keep Sengun, I'm trying to think, Jabari Smith, keeping those 2 guys a part of this trade, I think it's a win for them. Absolutely a win. I mean, obviously with Kevin Durant, it gives them now that premier go-to scorer. I still think Fred VanVleet is a good scorer for them, but I just think he was that real good scorer in Toronto because he had Kawhi. He had a Siakam. He had other guys around him that freed up opportunities for him. I think that's what Kevin Durant's going to do, is that I think we're going to see Fred VanVleet do some things you're going to be like, oh, that's the Fred VanVleet we remember. Going off, hitting perimeter shots, attacking the basket, doing all that. So I think for Houston, it's a great move for them. Obviously, no one's the biggest fan of Dylan Brooks just because he's that kind of that Draymond Green-like guy. But I think what you see there with that move, him going to Phoenix, I think it's going to allow, I think it's Torrey Eason. Am I saying his last name right?
I think you're saying it right.
And Kim Whitmore. I think it allows them to really buy into those young guys because those guys are kind of unique, kind of like a Carter Bryant. We talk about the draft a lot today. Those guys are kind of serviceable where they can play a couple different spots but guard multiple positions too, which is huge in the league today. I think for Phoenix, I think they're kind of at a dead end right now. They kind of need to make some moves. I think Devin Booker's the guy they want to just build around and have that be the foundation, but they just haven't found the right niche. And it's crazy to say this, Griffin, but 4 years ago, that team was up 2-0 in the NBA Finals. And now here they are at this dead end with all this dead cap money that they just need to get rid of. I think Bradley Beal, there's conversations about potential buyout for him. That's a lot of money still that you got to utilize towards your salary cap. I think Jalen Green is not the long-term answer. I think they might try to package him and try to send him somewhere else as well. So I don't think Jalen Green's going to be a Phoenix Sun. If he is there to start the year, he won't be there very long.
Oh, yeah, totally. That trade was definitely – I will admit I definitely had a very unrealistic NBA take on that when it first happened. I'm like, Jalen Green, why would you give up him and Dylan Brooks and only that? Because I thought it was only the pick. But I read into it a little more, saw a little more about it, and I'm open to it. I think it makes the Rockets now a contender, obviously giving them Durant. He's a 37-year-old, but you know what Durant could give you. However, there are more breaking news in that conference as well when Anthony Simons traded to the Boston Celtics for Drew Holiday. I gave my takes. We did a breaking news video about this last night when it went down, but what are your thoughts on that one? Obviously, Drew Holiday, you see the stats right here, and he's already in the Trailblazers outfit right there. But what are your thoughts, originally getting traded to the Trailblazers and then got traded to the Celtics, won the championship, and then now traded back obviously to the Portland Trailblazers, and you see the stats right here from a Celtics perspective from me too. You're getting a lot better of a player in Anthony Simons, and he's going to give you a lot more, and he's young. He's a player going into his prime. So what do you see for both sides of this trade? Obviously, Drew Holiday being a veteran presence in the Trailblazers locker room now, and you could see that being a big impact. So you already mentioned earlier, Coach AJ, with the talk with Cooper Flagg, with him going to Dallas, having some veteran presence in the locker room. Now this could give the Trailblazers a chance for Scoot Henderson to have that veteran leader in the locker room and any younger players there. And could this make them a playoff team as well? What are both sides of this trade? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's very ironic that the whole Drew Holiday tour going from Milwaukee. Okay, he wants championship. Great. We're going to trade you for Dame now. And then Portland essentially being like, we're not going to keep you. Where do you want to go? Wanted to go to Boston. Goes to Boston. Helps him win the championship. It was sad to see Drew go. But again, we talked about earlier, the dominoes were going to fall with the second apron and all that stuff. So the Celtics and Drew got everything out what they wanted. They got a championship. It's unfortunate that they weren't able to really defend their title with some injuries and other things that were happening with the team. So I think for Drew, I think he's going to be okay with this. I think, yeah, like you said, you got a 2-time champion going into that locker room with a lot of young guys, really mold them and show them what it's takes to win. And you got a coach there in Chauncey Billups, who's also won an NBA title. So that's a team to maybe keep an eye on. That could be, I would say, a play-in team potentially out west, but you know how it is out west. It's so cutthroat with how that division is. But that's a borderline play-in team. So it'll be interesting to see how that transpires there. Anthony Simons, great offensive talent, freak athlete. My question is, and I think maybe coming to the Celtics will maybe teach him a few things, but what's he going to do on the defensive end? I mean, I know that's kind of the big thing. A lot of people have speculated, and what I've read up on the last couple of days on him is hey, offensively, you're getting a stud. Getting a guy that can score, can fill it up. But on the defensive side, a little questionable. But you know how Joe Mazzulla is. He's a guy that holds people to a standard. You got Brad Stevens in the front office too. But I think you got some other guys, if you can get him to buy in on the defensive end, I think it could be a win-win for both sides with Portland and Celtics in this trade.
No, totally. I agree with you with that take. I think it's a win-win. And you look at that trade and it's yeah, he's not going to give you a lot on the defensive side of the ball. However, he's going to make up for that on the offensive side of the ball. But you're going to see scorers like him and Brown, fighting for, it's going to be a lot more, all right, I'm going to go down and shoot it. You're going to go down and shoot it. It's kind of going to be more of that because Simons is more of a aggressive scorer, and he's not going to be the type of player that's going to be a pass first point guard like Drew Holiday was for the Boston Celtics. So it's going to be interesting to see how they develop him. And then there's 2 more trades, and then we'll get ready to close it out. I know I've kept you on for so long, but obviously breaking news earlier today, CJ McCollum traded to the Wizards for Jordan Poole. Obviously, Kelly Olynyk was also added in this trade, and Sadiq Bey with some picks. What are your thoughts on this? And my initial thoughts is, all right, they get a young player in Jordan Poole, the Pelicans do, and in return for the Wizards, you get Kelly Olynyk, who's an older player, I would say. I think he's on the older side, and same with CJ McCollum. I couldn't say his name for a second, but you get 2 older players in that sense, and it's kind of you also have Chris Middleton over there, you have Malcolm Brogdon and Marcus Smart, you have older players, and it's you also have a little bit of sprinkled in younger talent as well. Do you like this move? And what the heck are for both sides? What the heck was this move? This is kind of like a Chris Middleton trade, when the Bucks traded Chris Middleton for obviously Kuzma. Yeah, it's why are you even making this trade? It's kind of the same sense, and it's what the Wizards are doing. What do you think they're doing over there in Washington? Do you like this move? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's you kind of nail on the head. It's kind of that head scratcher with the Middleton going to the Wizards now. This one, again, you just wonder, is it New Orleans more of saying hey, we're trying to get off CJ's salary, who'd be willing to take it on? Or is it vice versa? Is Washington be hey, we want some veteran presence. We've been, just like Utah, we've been so unlucky in the draft lottery since we've gotten rid of Bradley Beal and the loss of John Wall in the last few years. They're trying to find that their prominence again in the Eastern Conference. So yeah, it's kind of a head scratcher, but again, I know Seamus really went in depth about how the second apron works. It just makes you wonder, are teams making these moves to try to prepare for the next year or two on that end? The biggest talk point for New Orleans is going to be what's going on with Zion. I mean, that really decides their fate of the season every year. Again, all the pressure is on him to stay healthy, stay in shape, all that, because there are some pieces around there to do it, but also too with Dejounte Murray joining them and another Achilles injury guy right there from this past year. You don't know when he's going to get cleared. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think ultimately it might just be both teams trying to get rid of some bigger contracts to really try to maybe prepare for a move a year or two down the road.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I feel like that's the only sense you could make of this. But I think from the Pelicans end too, this makes them a lot younger in a sense too. And obviously seeing them get rid of Brandon Ingram and now CJ McCollum. I can't say his name for some reason today.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on TJ McConnell. That's why
Oh yeah.
him. So I keep mixing up their last names. But I look at it from that perspective and I keep seeing that and it's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but they're kind of getting rid of those older guys that, you got from that trade from Anthony Davis. And they're trying to kind of brush in some new guys and make them a contender later down the road. Potentially that could be the route they're going with. But I think we got to talk about this just one last time before we close it. Kristaps Porzingis, when we started this, he was on the Boston Celtics. However, he was traded in a 3-team trade for George Niang. I got some time to really – oh, I pulled up the wrong graphic right there. I got some time to really think about that and kind of develop more of a take on it. But what is your – obviously, you had a great thought with Niang, homegrown. Now he could kind of give you a lot more in Boston. And I look at this and I'm like, all right, well, Porzingis battling with injuries. Do you think that the Celtics did this to free up room? Obviously, they're under the second apron now. Do you think they did this to free up some room to make a guy, in the free agency? Like, I don't think this would obviously be a realistic one, but you could maybe go, all right, if they cleared up some more cap space, could we get a Miles Turner? I don't think that would be the guy. Obviously, just going to the finals with the Pacers, I think he's very prominent on going back to Indiana. But do you think this could be a look to, maybe get someone from free agency? Or what do you think is in store from the Celtics after this trade? Because it's definitely a head scratcher because talent-wise, you're definitely going down a big level. And only a second round pick, giving up a pick as well. You're definitely going down a big step from Porzingis, having him a 3 shooting center, but obviously battled with injuries and everything. But what are your thoughts on this trade, and what do you think is in store from the Celtics? You obviously said earlier how Brad Stevens is a mastermind. What are your thoughts on this? I think you're back.
Oh, can you hear me? So with what you're saying, yes, Brad is a mastermind in what he does as a GM. I'm looking at the depth chart right now for the Celtics, and something that Niang has done in the past, you can have him play the 5. Like he can be that undersized big guy, and you can really go with a small lineup out there. Again, I think Brad is, in his mind, he's still 1-2 steps ahead of what we're all thinking here. It's unfortunate with Porzingis, again, him getting sick. He was the X factor to all the success, to the Celtics winning the title. When he was healthy, playing his role, he was unstoppable. What was it, game 1 last year? Like, came in, was just unconscious.
I think I lost you first. Sorry, a little bit of internet malfunctions, but you were talking about how Brad Stevens is 2 steps ahead of everything, and continue on from there. Sorry about that. Some internet issues on my side, I think.
Maybe it's all that heat that's just giving us a sign.
I
Yeah, I think Brad's just, he's ahead of himself. I think he's seen, like, down the road. Again, I think what this is going to do, knowing you don't have Tatum, I think this is going to provide a lot of opportunities for guys to be like, hey, what are you really made of? Like, can you be a prominent figure in the rotation this upcoming season without Tatum, and lead yourself into bigger and better things once Tatum is back there? I think the guy that can really be dynamite, he had a great year this year, was 6th man of the year. Peyton Pritchard could explode this year for them, because he's going to be probably being the point guard when Derek White can play off the ball too. I think Peyton Pritchard will be the X factor, and that's just my opinion on the Celtics' success this year. Are they a playoff team? Yes. But I think a lot of it's going to come down to not putting all the pressure on him. But if Peyton Pritchard plays well, the Celtics are going to be just fine. They'll figure things out. Mazzulla will make the adjustments. You got talent still on there that's going to be the separators, but what does Peyton do for you overall?
No, oh, definitely. I agree with that. And I think it's going to be a big year for Brown to prove himself too, and I'm just happy as of right now, at least on the roster, we still have Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and Tatum and Peyton Pritchard. And I think those are the four that you could look are kind of untouchables in a sense. And I think you could even throw in Baylor Shireman as I don't think they're going to get rid of their rookie that they look so high on. So those are kind of those players that you're going to keep. You're going to want to sit here and develop them, and you really want to build around that. Simons might be a guy where he comes in 1 year. Obviously, he's only on a 1 year deal right now, so they have 1 year with him. Brad could kind of see, all right, if we like him, we'll keep him. If not, we'll let him go. Now we're under the second apron. We could give him a contract extension if it comes down to that. But you kind of look at that aspect and you see, all right, what's going on? I think I love the take that you said. Brad is like 2 moves away ahead of us. So I think he already has something cooked up. So you're not definitely going to trade Porzingis for just George Niang and now have not a lot of center depth.
Yeah.
I just don't.
You also need to think about this too. Tatum averaged just under 27 points a game, just under 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. You don't need one guy just to do that. And maybe Brad's trying to bring in guys, be like, okay, how can we bring in guys to collectively make up for Tatum's loss? Like, that's another viewpoint that he's probably looking at too, is like, how can we find guys to fulfill what is going to be missing from Tatum to still be successful?
Exactly. And that's because you have 1 year without him, and that could potentially be a bridge year for the Boston Celtics. However, my last question I have for you, I know I kept you on so long for this podcast, but my last question for you is, obviously with all these trades taking place, do you see any big trades, like trading up in the draft, trading picks tomorrow? What do you see in store for tomorrow for trade deadline? Not trade deadline. What am I thinking? See, I'm thinking of trades now. For the NBA draft, geez, I can't even think right now. For the NBA draft, and obviously, do you have any big trades that you think you'll see tomorrow, like moving up or anything? And what do you see coming out of tomorrow? And any final takes on players that you think will be picked or anything along those lines to close it out?
I think ultimately for the state of Maine, this is going to be such a cool dynamic for the state itself. People that are listening to the podcast, you're probably going to hear a loud roar from the Northeast in Maine for the excitement when Cooper does get drafted. First time ever we're going to see a young man from the state of Maine get drafted. So that's the one thing I think what I'm looking forward to. And, Cooper's a pretty humble guy, but it's like once that draft happens, like, you might see some raw emotion out of him. What does he say? Does he reflect back at his time in Maine and all that stuff? I know they just won it. Man, OKC having all those draft picks, like, I think that's a team where they're like, they can just even level up to another place with all the draft capital they have, with other pieces that they can probably throw into some trades to really mix things up. Because, again, you're going to see it eventually. That second apron is going to get the best of them, and they're going to have to make a decision. Sam Presti's done this before with KD, Russ, and Harden. So I think OKC is kind of a team to keep an eye on. And San Antonio, we know they're probably going to take Dylan Harper.
Yep.
But what do they do with that second lottery pick? Like, that could be maybe packaged off and sent somewhere. Who knows? I think there's a lot of excitement. I'm really hoping my Pistons can make a move, get themselves in the first round, try to find that one last piece to kind of give them over the hump, because they proved themselves in the playoffs. Like, they pushed the Knicks to the limit. Maybe could have won that series. Who knows? But overall, though, the excitement for the state of Maine. I mean, I'm not originally from Maine, but Griffin, knowing you are a Mainer, this is an exciting moment just for you. And it's just someone, too, that, like, again, small town kid, it just really puts some motivation into, like, it's going to inspire this next generation of Mainers that are going to come through being like, if Cooper did it, why can't I just be the next one to do it? So that's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to. And it's just, again, the NBA draft, any type of draft thing, it's just such a cool feeling to watch, the raw emotion, because they put so much, they've sacrificed so much in their life, and their short lives already to get to this moment. And for it to happen and see that raw emotion that you might not ever expect to see, I think it's just a cool, surreal feeling there. But any takeaways on your end?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm actually originally from Connecticut, but moving up here, becoming a Mainer and you living in Maine too, I think the excitement and, I lived 40 minutes from Cooper Flag. And I say a joke. I'm like, geez, we had a football game at Nokomis. I was out there playing football and he was probably in the gym shooting hoops. So just close to Cooper Flag, so that's the funny thing. And the crazy thing is he's younger than me, which is insane. And he's going into the NBA. So that's kind of all right, I'm getting old moment. All right, he's going into the NBA and I'm older than an NBA player right now. So that's definitely one to look at too, for sure. But it's going to be exciting. And I've had so much excitement. And I don't know if it's just because we live in Maine that we've been hearing a lot from Cooper Flag, but it's the fact that it's not even gonna be like a Jeremy Pena, if you want to connect it to MLB terms, who he played college in Maine and then won the World Series MVP, or like a player who, this is a baseball pitcher. I know a lot of baseball facts too, named Cody Lawrenson, who is in, the MLB in, I think the Twins minor league system. But it's exciting because it's not only a player who is going to be like, all right, well, he'll get drafted in the lottery. No, he's going to be the number one pick tomorrow. I think it's safe to say that Dallas is going to pick Cooper Flag, and it's exciting to see what he could turn into. But ultimately, I think I can say, and Brad Stevens already said it on his press conference too, there's going to be fireworks tomorrow. And he said it might not be us, but there are going to be fireworks. So expect a lot of teams to maybe potentially trade up in the draft, trade picks, I think you could see a lot of that. And do you really believe that the Pistons could get up there in the lottery? Not in the lottery, but the first round?
I don't know if they can get into the lottery, but I think that there's a way that they can get into the first round. Again, like I said, I'm super excited what Trajan Langford's done for the organization thus far. He's kind of brought a different mentality in there. And then obviously JD Bickerstaff was an incredible hire. Seeing where Cade is now, for the longest time, the last couple weeks, we were talking about KD potentially being a Piston. Knowing that we're on the cusp of kind of being back into this mix is super exciting. And to really go back to kind of end it here, you're talking about, obviously we're talking about Cooper Flag a lot. I think another thing too that's going to be so cool tomorrow as a surreal feeling, we watched him grow up throughout his time. I remember going recruiting and being told, hey, have you heard of this sixth grader, Cooper Flag? And I'm like, from Nokomis. I'm like, I've not heard of the kid yet. And then all of a sudden, next year comes by. You're starting to hear his name more and more. He gets to 8th grade. He gets to freshman. And Griffin, I've watched a lot of high school basketball. When I watched him as a freshman, and I talked to him about my dad earlier in the podcast, I remember calling my dad, and I told my dad, I was like, I just watched the best high school player in my life. In my time of watching high school basketball, I just watched the best player. And this is when he was a freshman, and what he can do. And then obviously when he came up his senior year at Mount Verde, it's clearly evident he's the best high school player I have ever seen in person play live. So for me to kind of say that now is as I get older, if he becomes this prominent figure in the NBA, I can tell my kids, my grandkids, if they ask about Cooper Flag, I remember watching him in high school. And I remember hearing about him when he was a 6th grader.
I do have a question too, a couple more questions regarding that now. When did you get to see him play in person, and have you ever shared any words with Cooper Flag? Or obviously, you talk about the recruiting process, being a coach at SMCC, have you ever encountered any of those conversations or talked to him? Or
I've never been into encounter with him, but I do have a funny story involving him and myself. So obviously his cousin played on our women's soccer team, and I remember we were just sitting in the office, and we're just kind of just catching up, chit chat, and I just said, I'm like, hey, because they're cousins, they see each other often. I'm like, how's Cooper doing? She goes, oh, we talk all the time and stuff. obviously at SMCC, we have this unique thing where we have Maine Free College. That was for the 2020 to 2025 class. I just said, hey, reach out to Cooper and just see if he'd be interested in some free college at SMCC. And tell him we can't provide him the NIL stuff that maybe Duke can offer, but if you want to just throw it out there. So she's like, yeah, I'll text that to him. He sent back the crying emoji faces. So, like, the fact that he read it and maybe he's like, it was all a joke, but, like, I sometimes now say jokingly to people like, yeah, man, we were the runners-up to Duke. He was thinking about the free college at SMCC, but he decided to go with Duke, so I'm okay being the runner-up, and at least we offered that to him. But that is like the one interaction I have had with him was through his cousin. But we have a young man coming in that played with Cooper on the AAU team, so getting to hear a little bit of the backstory of just who he is, and like depending on who they play. When they played the Boozer twins, like Cooper wasn't talking to anybody on the team because all he wanted to do was just to beat those guys. He finally got him going into his last summer. But I'll hear more interactions about Cooper through Jace Bessie, who got to play with him in AAU. Again, it's just a super surreal feeling that we're going to watch this young man be the number one pick tomorrow.
Oh, definitely. It's going to be surreal, and I can't wait to have you back on and hear those stories. We'll definitely have to have you on before the season starts and hear your takes on everything. But again, thank you so much for joining the podcast. And again, it's going to be super exciting to see what happens with Cooper Flagg. But with that being said, that's going to do it for the show. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below, and we will see you guys with the next one. Peace, guys.